In all the world there has never been, there is not, and there will never be any such thing as time. There's only place. What people call time is only place after place. Eternity is here already, and it has no mystery about it. Eternity is just another name for this endless scenery where we wander from one place to another. Gerald Murnane, Velvet Waters. Time is luck. Michael Mann. Prologue, The Hidden Core, 2098. The lightning curved inside the dark waters of the gecko's eyes as down below the mole wiped the shacked man's blood from his boot and looked up at the sky. The twin towers of rock curled and twisted into the cobalt and lightning-streaked sky. Angry lovers entwined were exactly as he dreamed them. The granite dusk moon, dripping down every rock edge, splashed down onto the sands, sweeping over the lizard who descended his perch. The mole was tired now, his flesh infused with ache, grit in his eyes, tongue glued to the back of his teeth. The dust cloud buzzed like injured bees. He had water, and now, thanks to the man he had just killed in the trade shack, he had an electric cattle prod, traded for a dried-out bat. And of course, he had his dreams. The dreams that had, against all odds and decency, led him here, to this dark desert and its violet sky. He catches sight of the silhouette of the lizard, about halfway down the towers now, static on a ledge. He sees significance in this creature, some form of portent. The dreams had arrived nightly since the mole was a young boy, but it was a very long time before the fragments formed images which formed pictures which gave instructions. He remembered awaking to his mother's silhouette in the fireplace, rocking back and forth, and felt always as if he had brought even more trauma upon her, more bad mojo by what was in his mind, as if she could see into his heart and knew the trouble that it would bring to them, to the entire family and those who surrounded them. He would always avoid her eyes in the morning, going straight out to fetch water for the village. His quest now to cross the outer lands and cross paths with the five masters along the way was an evolution in that psychic conversation. The mole considered for a while now that he had lost track of time, but now he considered that time had lost track of him. The gecko remained in place like a frozen shadow, and this, for the mole, just added to the meaning he could not interpret. He wandered through this desert on the edge of civilization, waiting for the doomsday clock to wind down and bury him in salt white sand. As a child, as he looked at the matricidal shadow, it was simple and linear. It moved swift as an arrow, but slowed down for his childish eyes. In later life, it seemed to happen all at once, as his philosophy deepened and his path widened. But now it seemed suspended, was in fact frozen, and had been for, well, how long? That was the point. Time had retreated and burrowed up into a defiant little chrysalis, suspended in an icy lake with only frozen fish for company. It spun its silky little thread in a microcosm, its movement barely perceptible, but its invisible tendrils stretched out into eternity dictated terms to the cosmos. Its oscillation occult, time had become the hidden core's shell. The longer the core hid, the more the Nefarious Ones could polish the surface, polish and obscure and deflect. And if the mole couldn't rise to the challenge of the masters and attain their wisdom, he would have no hope of stopping them, and he was told that he was the only hope. He left the weight of the shack behind him, out of sight but housing death, a skull cleaved almost in half. The mole found these bodies harder to leave behind now, and it's almost as if the ones who deserve to die the most are the hardest deaths to swallow. He had to call on words from the past for comfort. The same voices who told him he was the chosen one also told him that the hidden path grew in secret but would soon emerge. The lizard had moved. He scanned the ledge to find him. He was told a sign would show itself somewhere around this leg of the journey. The lightning shook the sky again, and now every jagged point of rock resembled a potential lizard or ant or neo-snake, and two images were superimposed upon one another. He tightened his grip around the instrument he knew only as a pain stick, moved his thumb up and down an inch across the metal barrel. The weapon was comforting. Even though the mole had been willing to die just days ago, the weapon was comforting. Did he dream all this long ago and all at once, as a child? His friend was by his boot now, nestling up to him like a cold-blooded puppy. Yes, the gecko was one with him. The gecko understood his journey, even though the gecko understood nothing at all. Part 1. The Hidden Core. The Non-Infinite Loop, 2025. You have been watching the bookshop for 3 hours now. Watching the rain, perhaps, but that is surely incidental. What did that writer say about the rain? Ah, fuck it, you think. Writers connect the dots. They're not forced to live between them. Like you, like Samira, you take the lessons which resonate, but you take them to the darker world of practicalities which, for better or worse, you inhabit. Really, you're watching the candle glow orange of the singular window. A perfect-sized window framing the bookkeeper like a lost classic nobody else wants to look at. The sky above the shop is a little too low, hemmed in, dirty and silver. Every so often, water pools too much in the dip in the ornate awning, and this causes a slosh to slide into the pavement and explode like a watery supernova. There is little variation between this, the bookkeeper's movements between the shelves and the counter, adjust his lamp, ornate, take regular sips from his coffee, which seems bottomless, and adjust something on the out-of-sight shelf above the counter, a clock perhaps. You try to remember from your only face-to-face. People pass by the window on the street side, but not many. One black dog, disheveled even before the rain came, was the most exciting thing to happen. Your car is too warm, and this CD, once a favorite, started to annoy you an hour ago. The green glow of the console dials are at times mesmerizing, caught in both limbo and afterglow, due to the night that's now as blurry as the present sky. You've been on this case for 3 months now, but it seems longer. This case has also been on you, and your mind hates them both. You would have liked to have dedicated more time to it, but time has been limited. In fact, you feel like time is being pulled down the cosmic drain, like the water gushing into a grate by your front tire. The doomsday clock, isn't that what they call it? You shiver, top off your coffee, and notice that there is a moon tonight after all. But it's that kind of dying sun moon, defiant silver on the cusp of night. You shiver again. Now you have to ask yourself once again what the hell you actually plan to do if Samira is in that back room, or more likely the hidden antechambers in the climate-controlled book storage basement. But Teller could barely get to the back room where they keep their so-called esoterica. That's like calling a stripper an exotic dancer, at least based on the few clear shots that Teller did manage to fire off with his antiquated but handy spy cam gizmo. He thought he saw an outline cut into brick, partially obscured by books, which could be one of the so-called hidden rooms, but also said could just be a substantial settling crack. Couldn't get close enough to tell for sure. Said the whole place seemed as cracked as the bookkeeper's psyche, and the thing with hidden rooms is they tend to stay hidden, oblique, until all involved tumble into their respective void or grave. The bookkeeper has been on your radar since around the time of the Filial case on the very edge of the western part of Chinatown. They didn't really call it that anymore, but like misnamed sex workers, those things have a tendency to defy categorization and stick around. You shiver once again, a double barrel this time, and clench and unclench your fists. Did you take more thorium than you remember? You recall a double drop, followed later by another double drop, 4 in total. You suddenly realize that the car is silent, the music has stopped, but you have no idea when. You were sure you have set the CD on repeat, since when was a loop not infinite? When a serpent finishes eating its own damn tail, that's when. Regardless, you need to make a decision here. Wait, go in, call Teller, go home. Check your glove box without even thinking about it for more thorium. When you catch yourself, you check yourself and then admonish yourself. What are you thinking? Never on a case. You check your eyes in the sun visor. Wait, go in, call Teller, go home. Things feel dreamlike. This whole evening has felt dreamlike. And now a flyer from the other side of the artist formerly known as Chinatown has fallen into your lap, backside up, the resultant avalanche of the overstacked box. You turn it over to see jet black etched on matte pink, forming the mysterious purple sign. Except it's not purple here, it's black. A homemade flyer for Samira and her best friend's favorite band. It represents only information or evidence you could dig up on the experimental 5-piece. You opt for the radio instead, bend an old-fashioned silver knob. A nasal whine and perfect to assured pitch. They're going back and forth with too little moderation. The voice between them is small. They aren't talking about the doomsday clock. They're talking about an economic policy. Well, that lays squarely on the pile of books you haven't read, though you still sense an air of meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Your coffee is depleted. Why does your foes last forever? How many cups has he had out of that thing? Maybe even his coffee is esoteric. You want to change the dial, but can't quite bring yourself to do it. Fear what lies on the other side. The console hypnosis returns, and while the edges blur, The dullest tingles form a web in the back of your knees, and the window you are watching softens. The bookkeeper's silhouette transforms into shadow. Your eyes are pulled back from somewhere distant to the logo on the styrofoam. Shit! The window! It occurred in a heartbeat, or at least the transition did. You were so distracted by the change in the light that you missed the exit of your quarry. Did you fall asleep for a second? Where did the bookkeeper go? And why is the light in the shop window icy blue? You've heard of secondary callback on prolonged doses of thorium, but didn't think you were much above the threshold. This time, the shiver has evolved into something both sharper and deeper. Not even willing to stick to your bloodlines, this one's off the reservation. A lone renegade telling you something is wrong and it's fight or flight time. You have to go in, and if you were thinking at all, you'd be thinking, why am I so afraid? You have to be sick or mad not to be, but not like this. The glove compartment is still open, so you root through the hemorrhaged paper for your old police-issue Glock. A comforting object even when empty. Then you jump out of your skin and your shivers chase you. An alarm? No, fuck. Your phone, you fucking idiot. High-pitched and electronic and hiding amongst troubling flyers and expensive receipts. It's Teller. You should have muted the thing. Stakeout 101. And he sounds urgent. Unless something big's happening, you better get over here. Here? Where? Green Eaves. The hospital? Why? You remember Yai Ping. Which brother is that? The meatpacking manager? No, it's Yu Pang. Yu Ping is the warehouse guy. Pang is the one we have an open case with. You face-down killers, brother. You're not going to let a vowel fuck you over now, are you? All those books you read? Your partner is entitled to this little shot of sarcasm. I can't imagine Yu Ping's up too much now. The McFrenzy brothers got through with him. For some reason I thought he was convalescing at Green Eaves. Well, check this shit out. He scarpered, left an IV trailing behind him, not been seen since. But guess what was spray-painted on the wall above his bed? A forwarding address? The purple sign. Longer Than the Night, 2030. All I was ever told was that the light turned purple. I was to disconnect the drive by both SATA leads simultaneously, and that I had a 5-second window to do this. So, in other words, my mission centered around the one part of the entire data center that I had absolutely no understanding of. But what choice do I have? This was a tall order as well. I'm talking at precisely the same time and exactly 5 seconds. I wasn't expecting a janitor, let alone a SWAT team. Perhaps I should go back a little. It all started, when does anything really start? When I finally got the call from Maurice about the settlement process. He'd been on a beach in Mexico for 5 weeks, and I'd been in a basement in England. My environment was hotter. Even without the wall of miners, it would have been hot as fuck in there. At least I didn't have to deal with the Mexicans. To his credit, he's already done as agreed and split my share of the commission between Bitcoin, Ethereum, IOTA, and Mcoin. Except, of course, the digital yuan that had already been transferred to the offshore account for careful investment in the emerging equities markets. Maurice was a fucker and a fuck-up, but Maurice came through for his friends when it counted. And boy, can Maurice count. Women, money, lines, gas fees. Greedier than a government, slyer than a Chinaman, and loyal as a bull terrier to a lucky few. Point is that apart from Maurice's little sabbatical, this particular global settlement had run as smoothly as his code. Let him suck up the mojitos. Let his endings be happy. Just would have been nice to know what the hell he was doing. could have halved my anxiety and my anxiety time. So, like I said, that's kind of where it all started. Maybe it goes further back to MIT, but that's for later. Maybe. And while I waited for a call from Maurice about whether or not our business with our East Asian brothers had concluded successfully, I had nothing to kill but time, which to begin with was mucho finio. But before I knew it, the monotony was getting to me, and it turned merry old England wasn't so merry after all. Started to wonder if it was meant to be ironic. I really can't see why so many of our countrymen are interested in the so-called old world. I thought my Anglican sabbatical would be easier. In my younger days, that's pretty much how I lived anyway. An endless subscription to streaming platforms, microwave burritos, Domino's pizza deliveries, sex hub, and video games. Oh, and a bit of trolling on AUDIOBOOK. Always fun. But I swear at times I started to think that old webcam of mine was looking right back at me. Not in the way you creepy fuckers usually roll, but like a literal and organic eye judging me. I mean, with everything that's come out in the past few years, it's become real difficult to assess paranoia levels. It's like that old expression, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not really after you. So I had to distract myself half the time with side interest in this and that. Cheap kicks to stave off the truth and tedium, going darker, going deeper, going more extreme when I got bored. The neighborhood wasn't good, but the street was quiet. I heard some shouting one day that turned out to be an anomaly. Glitch in the matrix. And there was nobody else in the house but me and this old English lady. She left me alone, and I left her alone. The usual deal, once in a blue moon she'd come down, but she never, to her credit, never just walked in like a starlet. She had respect, I had respect. But the boundaries of that exchange were pretty narrow. Not even sure if she was a widow. There wasn't much to it, really. We lived our own lives. It occurred to me one time, actually, that me and her were alike, separated by age and gender and culture, but both spent at least 90% of our waking lives glued to a screen. You think that's vicarious living or raw experience? No, seriously, I'm asking you. Oh, I see. Only you get to ask the questions. Well, I guess that's the nature of this dynamic. Okay, I'll get back to the fucking story. Though, just for the record, I suspect you didn't understand the question. So, yeah, okay, where was I? Me, basement, old chick. And then I had this weird succession, actually more like series of dreams. They were always lit amber, and some people had purple faces that were different to any other dream I ever had. I used to have these really intense nightmares sometimes, often actually since childhood, and I realized at some point in my 20s that these were not a product of horror movies or any of the other usual suspects, or even whatever was ailing me at the time. They went back to childhood, to the very start, pre-memory making, pre-conception even. Shit, worst dream I ever had was the first, and I realized the fire has always been there. The rest, modern devices, whatnot, was just trying to put it out with gasoline. Well, I gladly would get back to the dream if it wasn't near impossible to explain. Usually dreams change, right? Evolve very quickly, right before your closed eyes. You're here, you're there, 1 minute. It's some random person you have never seen or even thought of since school. And the next, it's celebrity, and then it's your mom. But these dreams were much more stable. Characters stayed the same, not just the purple weirdos, but the others too. The real people. They were people I knew as I knew them, and few had revealed themselves to be demons, monsters in disguise. But I always got this funny feeling that it was a sequel dream, because that's the other thing from when I was younger. Dreams often seem like follow-ons to earlier dreams, but I was never sure if they really were, or a false memory or a component of the new dream. Like some people say dreams are real. What if you remember that? Like real memories anyway. I'm not trying to avoid the question. All I can say is that they were more dreamy than usual and repetitive. People talked for a really long time about bullshit or technical stuff. But it was not like a dream conversation. On and on it went. These conversations seemed to last longer than the night. Longer than any real-life conversation, that's for sure. There was one character in particular, though, who stood out. I called her the Medusa Queen because her hair was shaped like snakes and writhing like snakes, but not actually snakes. And she'd always be sat in this electronic throne, quoting Shakespeare and Michael Saylor, and she eventually said, "Beware Satoshi." That's what she always called me for some reason. Satoshi, like Satoshi Nakamoto. What? Am I? Are you kidding? I fucking wish I was. If I was that freaking smart, I don't think I'd be sat here. She said, "Satoshi, beware of the one in the blue armor and get your ass across the wastelands." Weird, right? But I forgot this dream for a while, as you do, and settled back into that jagged sort of rhythm and found pleasure and distraction here and there. I tried the forums, a lot of forums, but it was just more of the same, really, and too much data. I tried to meditate. I awaited a call from Maurice, my thoughts circling around the various possible reasons for this non-contact. I drew up an enemies list, but tossed it in the fire semi-formed. I checked the news now and then, nothing that was likely connected to my absentee friends, but a lot of horrible shit all the same. There was another outbreak in the new Chinese territories, an explosion in Germany, and faces waxy under studio lights and no true information except between the words. I lost sense of time, a little. Things became slippery. But then two things happened simultaneously, or a day apart at least. One, I first saw the creature who led me to break into that data center and be in your fine and charismatic company. And two, the walls splitting open. No, I don't mean like damp. I mean peeled open, like actually opened, like a freaking zipper. Bukkake Bob and the Doomsday Clock. Why did I christen the little bastard that? Because he was fucking terrifying, that's why. I had to give him a silly name. Looking back at it, I think it was an attempt to demean him, to reduce his power a little, contain him in some way. Because to be afraid of a man or a beast is one thing, but when you don't know if it's a fucking man and you're not sure whether it's a beast, either way could be the product of a dream. I didn't know what was happening. Yeah, like I admitted before, I'm partial to the old brain candy on occasion, but nothing like before, back in the early days of the coding adventure, or even before that. Like before I found my niche, my life revolved around that shit, with varying degrees of success and sacrifice and rewards for a good 5 years or more. But nowadays, it's a once-a-year treat, like a 2-week staycation to celebrate my absent friends. But to get back to the point, my drug use has stabilized by both choice and necessity, but obviously, when you are in an old English lady's basement for a really, really long time, with no company that isn't the other end of a fiber optic rope, then yeah. Thorium, fuck no, that stuff's crystal meth for the smartphone generation. I tried it, but no, I'm not that hardcore. It makes time too shaky. I was actually lucky enough to get some of that old Cali shrub. You people know how scarce that is now. Organic gold. You're the ones who scorch the fields, after all. A lot of fields. Plus, the lady had some pills. Some expected poppy pain meds, etc. Others, I don't know why she had them. Hard to believe they were even there. No, I didn't steal a nice old lady's meds. I stole a vacant old lady's out-of-date meds she was never going to use. Full files that expired in 1975. Well, the seal was broken, but they were full. So you're probably asking yourselves now what I was asking myself at the time. Was I hallucinating? Well, I don't know. Although some drugs, mixing drugs, albeit lowish doses, plus anxiety about the transfer, plus concern about the money, plus the dreams and isolation could all add up to a breakdown. But I don't know. I thought I was pretty sane, very sane in fact, for somebody living the lifestyle I was living. The food was okay. She did know how to cook, and sometimes would deliver me these little Father Christmas-style food parcels just outside the basement door. Like I said, she was respectful. We both respected one another's boundaries. As keen as I am to bare my soul about Bob and the clock and why I was taking the thing you have me, unnecessarily I might add, cuffed to a shiny steel table for stealing, first I'm really going to explain this. I mean really explain it and answer your questions and preempt lots of, but why this and why that? And you didn't explain that part properly. Why didn't you tell us that in the first place? I'm going to have to tell you the whole story, and in my own way, because that Medusa chick was kind of wise, because I did see a man in blue armor. Yes, before I met Bob and started laying down the law, I saw a man in blue, and whether it was connected to the dream or random eschatology coincidence, he was up to no good, and I was pulled into his orbit. I knew that I should just lay low and kill my time. I mean, some people spend their entire lives on the internet. My sister's kid lives there, born late enough to grow up with it, and it's been school, social life, and career for him. So if half a generation can live a digital life, you think it could have occupied me for 5 weeks. But I had to get bored, didn't I? And I had to peek through that low-slung basement street-level window, didn't I? And I had to see the black shoes and the blue trousers and the blue shirt. And I had to see a United States postal worker, because at some point the Brits copied our postal uniforms like they copied everything else, doing what postmen should not be doing. Not stealing post or poisoning dogs, stealing data. I don't know if without my training I would have known what the hell he was doing, but I may have found it odd. When your postman acts like a cable guy and is furtive about it in the process, you know something is wrong. Or not right, at least. May 17th, that's when. I know the exact date because my quantum tokens went unexpectedly to the moon and back on the back of a bunch of IMF transfers designed to combat El Salvador's mass Bitcoin adoption, and I have, or had, a couple thousand of those bad boys. Just about the last coin I expected to make a decent money on. But that's crypto for you. Actually, I was even thinking about buying my landlady something to make it up to her for stealing all those pills. A better TV, perhaps, or at least a bigger one. It really was a shitty TV. She sat so close, but still her eyes were real small, and I wondered if the TV was shrinking them. But I figured it was those big old lenses she wore. But one day I see her shuffling around as the sun's coming up, and they're dark. She doesn't have the glasses on yet. They're really that small and dark, too. Like the TV was shrinking them and maybe pulling all the color out, too. It was a black and white set, maybe, too. At least it seemed that way because all she watched was really old movies with no color. Maybe those flicks wanted the color. You're sick, man. I'm still not convinced your silent partner here has a sense of humor, but you I'm warming to. Anyway, so that was the day, 5/17 or 17/15 as they put it. Which, let's be honest, makes way more fucking sense. And I watched him a little because, well, you know my situation. I would have watched a spider fuck a beetle if it was on the window. And I see him squat down to tie his shoelaces or something, I presume. But he's there for a while. So eventually I get curious enough to go upstairs to the lady's defunct dining room. Remind me about the dining room later. The dining room was fucking hilarious. Peel back one of those dirty net curtains, older than the TV, and he's trying to open the fiber optic substation, and this was one of the areas that hadn't been upgraded yet. Still ran on a glorified Allen key. But like I already said, if I had been an Electrum media engineer or something, I wouldn't have blinked. But as it was, I was like, what you up to, Newman? You know, the postman in Seinfeld? You never watched The Sign? Really? Jesus, I might as well be back in Limeyville. Well, that's another thing you need to work on. Just when I was starting to think you might have a sense of humor. Actually, just for the record, he wasn't fat like Newman. He was... Actually, that was the other thing. He didn't look like a postie. What do they look like? Well, they don't look like him. He was all wrong. This was all wrong. Why am I here, really? This is about more than me trying to take that drive. Sure, it's a big deal, but I'm not some sort of fucking terrorist. I'm not even a Democrat. That's funny, actually. Your partner does speak, and turns out she's the funny one. Do you like Seinfeld? Oh, okay. Back to the silent treatment. I watch him dick around with the front a little, and then he's round the back for a little backdoor action. And now I'm like, this is sketchier than fuck. You got to be careful about making stuff up when you're bored. Painting reality, seeing what you want. But I know I'm not making stuff up to kill the time. As a professional or as a citizen, he shouldn't be in there. Yes, indeed. I shouldn't be places I don't belong either. Damn, your partner is the witty one. Maybe she could do all the talking from now on. I can't believe it. A smile. I actually got a fucking smile. I didn't really see how I could challenge him, but I continued to watch. He went away, back to my instant noodle, my porn, which was becoming a real joyless exercise, by the way. Got so I couldn't even lose myself in a good video game, which is the one constant in my life from the spectrum of the PS7. I tried to write, not fiction. I never had any talent for that, a diary. But I didn't want too accurate a record of what me and Maurice had been up to or my plans. So I tried to write, but it never really came out right. He's back the next day, delivering mail again. I figured if he wasn't a real postman, I might see somebody else, somebody more postman-y. But no, there he is, once again. This time, he didn't go near the substation. But the next day he did, and by now I'd dig out some binoculars to see exactly what he was doing with those fingers of his. They were long, those fingers, piano player fingers, too long and too slender and not right for his frame. Kind of faggy, actually. These were real high-powered blades the old lady was packing, God knows why. To see the TV, maybe. So that's why I could see all the details of his digits. And I could see an ugly little mole just above the middle joint of his right index finger and a little bracelet like you know, like travelers and festival goers have, like a rubber band, a purple one with something dangling off of it. But if it was significant, it was too hard to see. The item, I mean, not the significance. But meanwhile, like I said, real life was real boring, especially considering what it was sandwiched between the luxury and the danger. The danger to come, I mean. I kept recalling those 5-foot mojitos and that effectively private beach in Vietnam and the people I connected with, even if it was all an illusion. Once upon a time, I could have done that basement thing standing on my head, but now... Sometimes I watched the birds through the basement windows or the spiders that crawled in front of it. Sometimes I watched the numbers on the blockchain, watched the money and the transactions cascade across the globe. That wasn't exactly hell. Doubt anybody in San Quentin would be playing the world's smallest violin for me. But it really started to kick in when I made the mistake of cyber-stalking an ex on AUDIOBOOK and tried to reach out to some distant friends in email. Problem wasn't that they ignored me. Problem was they replied. Jesus, the things I read, when they weren't annoying, they were depressing. Their small lives and God. Well, this one guy in particular, talking to him was like watching cuckold TV. The second most pussy-whipped man I ever met. So I start following the so-called Blue Night around town. I say town, more of a large village, really, and the old lady's place is on the east side, further from the center, or the so-called new builds. Leafy, grassy, golf coursey. You don't need to know about the topography. Well, you kind of do, actually, because the topography is about to get a whole lot more weird. You guys know anything about psychogeography? That in the training manuals? No takers? All right, doesn't matter. Fuck it. I'm following him around and around for days, and this motherfucker seems to walk in circles. Weird, tight, concentric circles, but occasionally makes these fascinating deviations. Sometimes he enters a shop and is there longer than is strictly normal, but not really long enough to be truly suspicious. I'm sure you guys know all about that. Imagine half the job is separating suspicious activities from coincidence. No such thing as coincidence? I thought that was just something people said in old-school network cop shows. No such thing as coincidence. Okay, I'll shut up and describe the shop. The shop was a news agent, the only distinguishing features of which were a couple of old plastic animal statues. I mean, like you might see at a kiddie park, but like the real old defunct ones that you can't believe they haven't already replaced or thrown in a giant skip 2 decades ago. Faded, chipped. Shit, one looked like a shark had taken a big chunk out of its side. The bear one. And there was a camel, I think, but a camel standing upright on 2 legs, if that makes any fucking sense whatsoever. I don't know why they were there, and I can't believe some feral teenagers hadn't stolen or smashed them years ago. But like I say, nice part of town. Not sure this town even had a rough part. Seemed kind of insulated. All he ever came out with was a rolled-up broadsheet. Never could scan the title, sometimes a brown paper bag that seemed from its shape to hold a box. They don't brown bag liquor like us. It was a large bag. Now, he was always a little trickier to track after the shop, in between that point and the location where I tended to lose him, as if he'd been energized, like him and Mr. Patel had done a couple of lines of speed. Then he seemed to disappear through those hedges as if they were reconfiguring themselves. The whole town was moving just for him. When I followed him after dark, not even the moon was right. I started to get this weird sense that I was in a dream, back with the purple-faced people, or somewhere close to their kingdom of dirt. Actually, I'd been questioning reality for a long time, before the basement, before I met Maurice even. Intermittently, anyway. And kind of invisibly, too. But then, when I lost him on the 6th day, something else happened, and I couldn't decide whether it was weirder than seeing the postman messing with the junction box in the first place. A pub. I didn't know the town well, admittedly, at all, but this pub seemed to appear on a street corner overnight. Could have sworn on the old lady's life it hadn't been there the day before. Not a brick. There was a big old oak tree in the car park. That may have been there, but the pub. Yeah, sure, I know it must have been. And I just got lost, but then slimy little demons don't usually lurk behind the basement walls of a stranger either, at least not in the literal sense. There's a large car park, common over there in what they coined family pubs. Imagine taking your fucking family to a bar. Limeys. They drink like Koreans. There's a nice long path, and either side of the street end there are 2 trees, symmetrical, of a type I've never seen. Building is pretty new and generic, but the windows look more like an English-themed pub, like you might have found in old NYC, and they're real dark. So I entered its, shall we say, cavernous depths, for this was definitely a different animal on the inside, not the right interior for the exterior, like a movie production trick. And I remember thinking, thank God I didn't come here at night. No way could I have handled it at night, but I couldn't tell you why, not for a second. Would have chastised myself at the time, but now, None of this was making sense. I imagined seeing the postie at the bar, propping it up, usual later middle-aged loudmouth tossers. Yeah, that's their slang. Their slang's better than their food. Opinionated tossers. That's what the old broad said when I asked her about pubs. You know the type, loud as motorbikes, putting the world to rights with their mates, not a GCSE or brain cell between them. Most animated I ever saw her get. Most fluent, too. Wish there was more, but there never was. I imagine the postie being that kind of alpha in a teeny-tiny pond. Vacant young girls in the corner, like they can't find their way out of the shadows and think their fucking phones are going to light the way. I remember a newspaper, too square and perfect in white, big headline taking up too much space and crushing the byline. 1 in 5. What? Where? Who? I don't know or care, but all the same that headline gave me such a sense of impending doom. I'd forgotten why I was there and was inexplicably afraid to approach the bar, to stand there and order a drink. I was never that nervous, even when I was young and nervous. There was a far-off TV in the room, too big, and I couldn't even read it beyond the flickering blue and red light, muted. And it all, for a flash, reminded me of a dream, somewhere in a sequence. I'd been here before, but maybe not in this body. No, clean and dry. This whole man in blue armor quest thing had sobered me, and remember, I hadn't met Bob yet. I'm still getting to that. Haven't even gotten to the part where the walls part company and the bricks bleed secret slime. This all seemed to be prelim now that I tell it, in fact, something designed to soften me up, fatten the sow, so to speak. Talking of fat pigs, I see one at the very back of the furthest room, all alone and dominating his table, like an outcast from the fags at the bar, like they threw him out for eating up all the bar snacks. I'm not being catty, Agent. He looked like a pig in a very real sense. The weird quarter light of this freak pub didn't help with that. Help with him. Cut off some of his angles, replaced human skin with pig flesh, like the pig man in that classic sitcom you don't watch. There he is, one of the pig men, in all his glory. Crisp shirt, nice and clean and expensive, royal blue, and he smiled at me as if he were waiting for me, expecting me. What do you think happened next? What usually happens when you meet strangers in pubs? He invited me to join him, and he told me a story. Meet in the supply closet. You're on the ward, and you can't tell what's regular activity and what's missing patient trailing IV drip and disappeared into the ether territory. Teller rounds the corner and, approaching, looks excited and disheveled. Nice but uncared for shirt hanging half out. This is his majority setting. You ask, what have we got? What don't we got? First question's probably quicker. One of Teller's exes said that you and Teller were more than just workable partners, that you were a double act. Well, putting the sign aside for now, because obviously that both confirms and confuses more things than we can count. An orderly coming in through the main entrance to the hospital thinks he saw someone stumble out, matching his description. But meanwhile, some geriatric off the psych ward escaped, if you like, around the same time. Same hour slot, anyway. Plus, he says he was distracted, and a visiting member of the public who was smoking a cigarette on the east side of the car park saw a figure. Ambling, he said, but again, near a street light has been out for weeks, so he didn't see much more than a shadowy bulk. An ambling shadowy bulk put out an APB. Yeah, right. Also that guy, the visitor, I mean. He was a little skittish coming forward, as you're not supposed to smoke there. This makes you laugh. considering the crime rate and the police resources of this city, and the multitudes that blind eyes are turned to. Duty nurse? He seemed a little spooked, actually, like almost too much. Not as if the sign was in blood at the end of the day. Could have been dementia patient graffiti for all she knows. Wondered if she was guilty, then wondered if she was strung out, then just figured she's high-strung. Anything else? There was one thing, less weird, but random. Could be something, could be nothing. Don't keep me in suspense. They also found a slab of bloody meat in the janitor supply cupboard. Define a slab. Well, a large fucking chunk, Cedric. I think, obviously odd, but is it connected odd? Well, back in the squad, we used to say no such thing as coincidence. But I don't know anymore. Starting to think Burroughs was right. What? Who? Doesn't matter. I assume we questioned the janitor about the meat. He seemed okay. If he stole it, he wouldn't store it there, would he? Unrefrigerated, on the fucking floor. Fine, but run him anyway. You were responding to the look he gives you in response when you say, something's wrong, and our two wrongs just collided. We gotta cover every side of this. Teller nods, shuffles pages. What cut? Anything tasty? Lamb, they think. Lamb, hey, got ourselves a fancy janitor. You're here, acting like cops as opposed to private detectives, because your history and, let's say, compromised dismissal have given you something close to carte blanche across much of the city. Just as long as you remain on the right side of the law and don't step on the wrong toes. Some toes would rather not encounter you at all. On your way to see the duty nurse, you pass a coffee machine and stop to get one. This turns out to be a tactical error, because as the machine is about midway through spraying scalding water onto the ghosts of coffee beans, who would sidle up to you beside Kurtz, Jarvis Kurtz? You haven't seen this piece of insidious shit for about 5 months, and it isn't nearly long enough. It takes every ounce of self-control your tired body possesses to not groan out loud there and then. This motherfucker is a classic example of ugly on the inside and the out. His funny-shaped head is top half insidious pedo doughball, a Putin face, the lower half a Batman jaw. Bucks the trends. But it's his goddamn eyes that you cannot stand. So pale and almost square, they search too much, they see much. And when they settle upon you, well, you want to break the Batman jaw. Jarvis is like the Anti-Crothers when it comes to fashion. He tries and dies every time. Today, his trousers, even more ill-fitting than usual, melt into the gray tiles of the hospital floor. Now, his hairy hands beat a ring, a golden wedding band, and this is an irritation. Teller once quipped that the only ring I thought that guy would wear on his finger would be attached to a little boy's anal cavity. You were impressed by this Crothers-style line. Marge was not. As he babbles on, all you can hear is your desire to pop the prominent pimple above one of his eyebrows. It's ripe and ready, and you ponder why he doesn't just do the deed. Fuck, you hate Jarvis. You once saw him wearing a bandana at a works bash and initially thought it was a joke. But, to your dismay, he wore that thing all night. His wife, once too good for him, seems to have been soured by him. Between the sight of Jarvis and the too bright hospital light, you can feel a headache coming on. You rub your eyes and make your excuses. You finally track down the duty nurse to the reception desk. Teller was right about her, but also wrong. Or there's more at least. Seldom washed hair, wrinkles around the eyes, blisters around the nose. Subtle, but there is your close enough and know to look. And the strangest black smudge just right of her lips. Doesn't look like dirt or ink or any kind of temporary mark, but also unlike a birthmark or burn you've ever seen. There's something a little unnerving about it, and it elicits sympathy for this woman who may have been very pretty once upon a time. Her uniform, however, is clean and pressed, and she holds herself with a certain authoritative confidence. She reminds you of the closest thing you ever came to marriage, and this puts you even more on the back foot. Teller is right that she is high-strung, but she's strung out too, or at least has been in the last 48 hours. You detect hidden depths and would rather never meet again. You hope that she won't prove relevant to the investigation. The more you question her, the more she eases up. You ask her a bunch of questions you know she has already been asked a dozen times now. You ask her about the old man who ambled off the psych ward. You ask her who was first to discover the paint, the purple sign, above Yu Ping's bed, and if anybody touched the paint when it was still wet. You ask her if they ever found meat or any other weird things in the storage cupboards before. And finally, you ask her where she could be reached if you have any more questions. You never really sense any dishonesty in her responses, but something is just wrong with the whole scene. You decide to snoop around the general area outside. See what your spidey sense tells you. It's quiet, and there are less cars than you expect. A spent newspaper blows about in the gaps between them. You look up at the moon. It's large and full, but distant. Some shouting startles you, a quarreling couple, but they soon vanish. For a moment, Nurse Sanders pops back into your head. You see a cat, colored funny under the streetlight, creep around a large bin. For a moment, you think the silhouette of a person is watching you from the grass embankment. But after a bit more staring, your eyes adjust to reality, a partially lit sign for the road above. The light is funny here, the moon and sodium mixing into light and diffusing into shadow. Behind it, the financial district, its distinctive, some say iconic, twin building of gold and platinum light. You have a friend from before your homicide days, when you spent a brief period in Vice. Being one of a tiny minority you are still in touch with in a personal capacity, he called you a few nights before, expressing his frustration with a crypto-driven deep web-linked laundering case. The type where the cartels and corporations get in bed together in the lower echelons of the dark net for a mutually beneficial gangbang, or perhaps orgy would be a more fitting metaphor. Society being the one on the other end of the gangbang dynamic, the cartels and corporation being most satisfied with the arrangement. He talked of how follow the money was for the TV cops only. Try and follow the money in the real world, he said, and it would lead straight into a Bermuda Triangle just off the coast of the Cayman Islands. One obsequious little suit cunt in particular was driving Scion up the wall. But it was the SEC, the so-called regulator for whom the worst of Scion's ire was reserved. You suddenly wish you were home. The streets have changed for you. You think of a thorium for a moment before pushing it back from your mind, back to where the thoughts are before they're born, and you remember what somebody said about this. You look down, and the cat has joined you, all the light of the city reflected in its dull eyes. It knows nothing. It can't tell you a damn thing. 2 sets of fish. The lift opens. The corridor pulls you in. Clean carpet, air-conditioned space. You can't believe how well they maintain this place. You can't believe you can afford to live here. You enter your apartment at precisely 8:03 p.m. You know this because a feminized computer voice tells you so. The pre-programmed smart lighting of your smart home kicks in like a good boy. You slump down at your workstation, knowing even as you do that it is a mistake. You won't get back up. You know this. Everybody knows this. You're supposed to maintain that running on empty momentum right up until the end. Shoes off, fresh clothes, state regardless. Drink, caffeine, alcohol, depends on circumstances. Do the bare essential and then get comfortable. Never mind what the hell you are doing at the workstation. Aptly named because this domestic PC sees more work than pleasure, and you are far too old for Sex Hub and don't even know what AUDIOBOOK is. And you're stuck here now for at least 10 minutes. The cold is inside you, the rain close behind, and that cold has subdued your bones. The only good thing is that all the unexpected and weird developments of the day, from the point that the light changed and your suspect vanished and the telephone rang and teller spoke out, to just now in the subterranean parking bay, have robbed you of your apathy and time to redose on a thorium. Because, though you told yourself you would fight it, you were probably lying to yourself. And even if you were telling the truth, it would have been something else, some lesser drug. So there's that. You don't have to worry about that. But the questions and images are swimming around in your head and vying for space. You're the kind of person who has always struggled to switch off after work, except one short spell as an egg collector at a snake farm when you dropped out of college. But this business would fuck over anybody. So many questions, and you had plenty long ago outside the bookshop on a stakeout of ambiguous duration. The bookkeeper, Samira, the possibility of a hidden room, another hidden room, but now other cases have collided with the one that vexed you, and those pieces don't seem to fit. A spastic jigsaw puzzle of faded pieces. You are distracted by dual lights cutting across the night sky. Military helicopters, you guess from the color and placement of the lights. Your high-rise glass mutes them. The picture of your would-be daughter is framed by silver, the monitor by chrome, and the fish tank is its own entity. The reflection in the windows is pleasing, but now the twin lights have joined the fish, and the fish seem to have made a special space for them, accommodated them. They swim, the helicopters welcoming them into the herd, their long-lost brethren. At a glance, it is hard to tell those distant lights, shrouded in night and density, and those pale reflections of exotic and expensive fish apart. They are all pale, drained of their color and equally matched inside and outside of the glass. You watch for a while and forget you are looking at two images superimposed, a trick of light and reflection, and slowed by narcotic ghosts, and believe for a while you are just watching the one tank floating magically outside your window. All the pieces fit, and for a blissful few moments you can forget both missing girls, the one in the frame and the one in the cell. The frame is expensive, but occupied only by the mass-produced placeholder it came with. You think that you may freak your partner out a little if you place him in a fancy frame next to your PC. Right now, Samira is no obsession, merely a professional fixation. However, you do sometimes ponder how much she occupies the space inside your mind allocated to that non-existent offspring, and whether she is in danger of barreling into something like the girl from the lost case back in your Vice Squad days, that murkiest yet sharpest of memories. You access the police database that you shouldn't still have access to and start working the mugshots, monochrome and pale silver. The devil's in the details. You feel as if you have seen these faces before, one and all. The sound makes you jump invisibly and silently out of your skin. The coffee machine warming up, as it's programmed to, the blue light on its base, a lone eye in the dark of the kitchen. A decision has to be made. Do you sleep, drink that coffee when the system informs you it is cooked, or do you? Another idea has to be faced, that perhaps the real source of your gargantuan unease is that the bookkeeper is no longer looking like your prime suspect, the most sinister player in this production. There are darker nodes on the network, bad actors at play. He may no longer be the most mysterious even. And this also begs questions about your instincts, be they fading with age? You know all these strings are tangled into one big rope which threatens to hang you. But you have to zero in on one thread nonetheless, if you are to have any chance whatsoever of unpicking it. Finding the sign over the hospital bed is obviously a game changer, so maybe a better understanding of that is required. Perhaps you told Teller to quit his investigation of that strand a little too soon. Perhaps he should have made the trip to Montana after all. Samira had been your priority, obsession, guilt complex, call it what you will, ever since her out-of-their-element parents drifted into your office like context gone wrong. The mother clutching a hanky, the father being able to meet eyes with any object in the office but you. Ghosts who had remembered their skin. The girl had disappeared on her way home from an unknown location. Her bedroom had led you to the sign, and the sign had led you to the bookshop. You needed an expert opinion. Now you're not even convinced that that lead is good, that the bookkeeper is even involved, let alone culpable, let alone the jailer of his own walls which hold this girl you have only seen in photographs. Is she alive? Looking out at the city, it is hard to believe anybody is still alive out there. Perhaps only the generators breathe now, pumping the blood around the system powered by a far-off desert somewhere, full of even bigger generators. Semi-estranged Chinese brothers, Yu Ping and Yu Peng, had been warring over the percentages of the lion's share of Chinatown, which they used to control together or apart, but at least not at war. Unfortunately, this schism of brotherly love occurred when they were already involved in a war with the Irish mob, if there really was such a thing outside of Ireland. Suffice to say, they are a big enough mini army of plastic paddles to make moves and challenge the brothers. So a lot of violent and complicated shit happened, with people not being quite sure who was on whose side and exactly what they were fighting over. Until one day, somebody, assumedly the Irish brothers, hung Yu Ping from a ventilation shaft in the east side of his own building. Although, as Teller pointed out, it was a form of poetic justice, considering he brutalized a Korean family to take possession 2 or 3 years earlier. Meanwhile, Yu Pang had hired you both to try and find out what his brother's interest in a gaming cafe 3 miles outside of Chinatown was. But this, all of this, and none of this, was ever anything to do with Samira or her heartbroken parents, until that strung-out duty nurse discovered that most esoteric of symbols sprayed above the fallen triad's underfunded hospital bed, because that sign had been stamped in multiple places on the missing girl's case. And you know more with every passing second that you should have let Teller follow his instincts from there to that small town in Montana. You rub your eyes, cloud them in black, followed intricate geometric patterns of red and blue. You see things with your eyes open, then, stuttering through your closing eyes, caves with cave paintings seen only by candle flickers, and a sheriff laughing in slow motion. But this parody isn't real, and you wonder if you are falling asleep. You wonder if you are losing your mind. The coffee pops, and you take yourself to the bathroom, passing through a cold spot on the way. A reflection makes you jolt. You really should be asleep. In the bathroom, you look into the floor-to-ceiling mirror and don't recognize yourself. You're not even convinced that this is what you currently look like. Your eyes might be misled by the filter of the day and peripheral effects of synthetics. This room is too bright, and you try to avoid it. You don't even possess the strength to tell the system to drop it a few octaves of orange gold. You slump into your sofa. It's softer than you remembered. You stare at the superimposed fish tank, rear projected and floating inside your apartment and out. There seems to be more fish. Their colors have changed. You recall the shadowy figure in the parking bay. You had just locked your car, glanced toward the door marked exit, when you saw someone move between 2 rows of cars. He was perhaps carrying something. You only saw him for a moment, but there was something off about his movements. It didn't help that you didn't see him again. He wasn't moving in the direction of the exit, and you didn't hear a car door. You drift into sleep and dream of that sheriff. His appearance extended this time, his laughter unchanged, silent and ignorant and spiteful. And for a moment you realize you are dreaming and suspect you have dreamt this dream before. But soon you forget this as the dream takes hold once more, and it lasts for many, many hours. More hours than the sleep that houses it, or even the night which holds the sleep. Obstructions and blurs. You cut out the engine and watch a Japanese-looking man dressed head to toe in black across the road. He's carrying a slimline metal case and pummeled by the midday rain. Will it ever let up? He looks about as solid as one of your night visions. It makes you think of the figure you saw scuttling beneath the parking bay lights. But that was probably just a neighbor minding his own business. Overwork and a lack of sleep has got you chasing phantoms. For a second you think he was going to enter your building, but he actually goes into the adjacent pet shop. Maybe he's got something in the case he's looking to sell. A very frustrated snake, perhaps. The rain seems endemic at this point. It hasn't quit for weeks. If it did so in your sleep, and it started to appear in your dreams to compensate. You scribbled down 6 key points for today's investigation on a slip of egg-colored jotter paper on the breakfast nook before you left your apartment. Leads, both unfollowed and dissolved. You're questioning everything now, but your sleep has at least helped. You are recharged and you are ready to investigate. You are much sharper, but you have also reminded yourself to take a breath. These things come slowly. Most of your favorite writers claim there is no such thing as inspiration, but you know this to be wrong. You've seen it in your work. You've seen it in the gaps between the buildings. 2 things you can always count on: inspiration, redemption, not much else. You look up to the darkest 3rd floor window and happen to catch sight of Marjorie flapping her flabby arms around a cluster of box files. Marjorie has been with you longer than anybody now. Marjorie is reliable and immune to bullshit. You assume Teller is somewhat behind her, gambling online, reading a trash magazine, or being the best damn partner you ever had. Teller is unpredictable, as is his varying pace. Ease in, ease out. He could be picking his teeth or connecting the dots like a motherfucker. This is what he does. This is what he is. You cross the street, sidestepping a puddle, almost getting sucked down the drain. You swear metal almost swipes your pants leg. The trash can between the pet store and your building is hemorrhaging garbage. You can no longer keep track of whether the other floors are occupied or not. Wasn't there an occupancy firm? The box light in the reception hall flickers above your head. A would-be halo. You see spiders duck for cover. You ascend the stairs. The air is perhaps more stale and clammy too, but then it's never nice. A garbage truck hisses outside. You see a flyer nailed to the wall from the corner of your eye. You hear something heavy being dragged about the top floor. You see mirage-like silhouettes through the dirty glass. You enter the office. It is as professional and well-kept as the surrounding building is grubby. Marjorie is filing. Teller looks a little too relaxed under the circumstances, chewing gum, half focused on his laptop screen. The slick Sony model is as new as the table is old. You go for the coffee, as is your way, your routine, whether you want or need it or not. Marjorie is good at keeping it warm, but this will never stop the beans being inbred outcasts. You drink it anyway. What are you doing for Cedric? Doing, Marge? Doing? Well, that's good. And here's more good news. We already got that report. Now that's 7 early. I told you that new broad down at filing was the shiznit. Can I get a hallelujah? This solicits a semi-serious what-the-fuck look in Teller's direction from you and Marge. Okay, everyone's a critic now, he quips, but he doesn't really care. He just grins, his shit-eating grin, and goes back to his screen. This particular mode of body language that Teller has could be staring at digital tits, could be on the verge of breaking a major case, could be thinking about his high school sweetheart. He's just like that. But when he gets anxious, he's anxious. And when he gets mad, oh boy. Any important calls, Marge? Well, someone called from Jackson's campaign. Wants to know if we're going to vote for him or McNulty, if you consider that important. I do not. You asked Marjorie to fish out the file you kept on Pang's Gaming Cafe a couple of months back. In particular, you want those high-focus telephoto shots Teller took. At the time, he referred to them as less than useless, and at the time, you were inclined to agree. But something is bugging you now, something unremembered which crossed your mind last night, that you could only half remember at the time. You look down at your coffee and are surprised to find it empty. You refill from the dregs of the pot. You get half a cup and some mutterings from Teller for your efforts. You move into your office. She has the folder in front of you before you have even sat down, and she exits without a fuss. You lay out the 4 main photos in a rectangle. There are half a dozen or so more, but they aren't for shit. Obstructions and blurs. First, you run your mind through the edges. You always begin with the periphery and then work into the center. Same as with any case. You know the surface is a distraction. You're looking for the core. You know that it is a waste of time trying to remember what you remembered last night. It will come if it is important. It will explode like a firework in the desert. What it will illuminate is another story. Pick one. Now this one is the plainest and least enticing of all. However, there is one element which grabs you. Although it has eased off with age, you always get a funny feeling about the figure to the top right of the frame. Seemingly, assumedly, just a random customer. Their mid-length hair is caught mid-motion, semi-obscuring the face, and making it hard to even know whether you are looking at a man or a woman. There's something in their hand, perhaps a coffee, but it's impossible to say for sure. You think from the hair and the build it is a woman. Teller's jury is still out. Pick two. The room, shot from an angle different enough to transform the room. The distance between objects appears different. The front door, a lifetime away. The monitors, smaller. Pick three. This picture holds the only other element besides your irrational feeling about the obscured figure in photo number one. A semi-visible monitor, the only one in the quartet that gives up more than the vaguest details, has a banner at the top of its screen. The name was so unusual that you ran it, more out of sheer curiosity than any sense of a viable lead. But it never came up. You couldn't get a single viable hit, despite what search engine or browser you used. Not even the internet WizKid. Teller could track it down for you. He said he even used archival databases. So the fairly obvious solution of it being taken down didn't really cut the mustard. Unlikely it was taken down in the small interval between the photo being taken and the photo being developed. 2 days. Teller said it could point towards the deep web or even the meta-network, but that wasn't so easy to track and archive. One thing is certain. This mysterious website is no small part in creating your obsession with these 4 images. Pick 4. Not much to tell. An old Chinaman next to a fish tank. A small pencil behind his left ear, a bookie form in his right hand. The large fish tank occupies half the frame, and one fish dominates the waters, big, round, and black. You pass Marjorie's desk on the way to water the plant. She is immersed in something. You stop for a second to see what Teller is doing. You really taking another look at those pictures of the cyber cafe? Best of the bunch, and they tell us virtually nothing, man. Just a hunch I can't let go. Well, you taught me to follow those, and haven't you been proven right over the years? But, well, those pics, I don't know. The website is strange, admittedly. Probably not related to the case. Strange, just strange. Probably a degree or two of sketchy as well. But I can't help you with that. Hit a dead end there. And there he casually tosses his pencil and spins his chair around so as to face you fully. The woman, however... Woman? Oh, you know, the man-woman thingy. Old twirly hair in the upper right. Yeah, what about them? Well, I did have a thought on that. But it would be a long shot even if it were tracking down a major lead. I mean, for like a major case. And we knew just what we were doing. You know, looking for. So far, something this trivial. You think you have a way to enhance it or something? Not something, the first thing. I have a buddy from NSA. You remember you met him briefly on the Bolano case. He still works there. He wasn't fired. He was promoted. False rumor bullshit. So he should have access now to the Black Widow. Now, I don't know if that can do it, but if anything on Earth can, it's that bad boy. Is it software? No, it's the software, the best for this situation, developed by them, exclusive to them, and very, very in-house. Well, surely they keep that on a real tight leash. Don't even loan it out to other government departments. I can but ask, brother. I can but ask. Oh, yeah, by the way, any word on that meat in the closet? Explanations how it got there? Any toxins found? No, but the walker is getting more and more curious. The walker? Yeah, you know, the old guy off his meds who decided to get off his wad, too. I thought he was just detail. Well, we all did. Looks like it might be a little more. Elaborate. Well, it turns out that he wasn't just your typical juicehead. He wasn't a vagrant or some guy who couldn't look after himself no more. He was living in one of those private citizen care homes. You know, where they're licensed, but basically anyone without a record can do it, and their Social Security checks go straight to them for food and rent, or a portion at least. Well, this is supposed to be one of the better ones. It's in the Wiltshire area. There are like 6 clustered around there. But that's not the weird part. The weird part is he just appeared there one day. Say what now? Mesmeraldo just showed up in a puff of magic smoke when everyone else was sleeping. They found him in a vacant room. He had some stuff with him. Not sure the details, but at least an overnight bag and a framed picture. Know that much. Wasn't booked, expected. No app form or paper trail. Just there. Just there. Just there. And he said... Well, he didn't say a whole much that equated to sense about how he came to be there. Like we know he was on the fucking psych ward, psychotropic up the yin-yang. That he came from East Texas and his dada dropped him off the day before. But no details, no proof. And you said none of the other residents have seen him before. Nope. The next bit is more a private mumble you doubt your partner catches. Fucking weird. And check this. He has some sort of huge scar on his body that he can't account for either. Stomach, I think. But the clinic I spoke to described it as gnarly and evil looking. Gnarly and evil, hey? He write that in his official statement? Sounds like the whole fucking case to me. Maybe we should let this clinic take the reins. So I take it from the description we're talking an assault. Someone meant to do him damage, not an accident. I guess, Sauce, but fuck, really, I don't know at this point. It's like you said. How do we know what is directly related and what is just in the vicinity in a case as convoluted as this? Well, as per usual, we explore all avenues, but we focus on Samira, her parents, the creep at the bookshop, and the missing Chinaman. And where is Ping? On your way back to your office, you see what Marjorie is so immersed in. She has a variation of the purple sign up on her screen, and it's blue. She seems furtive, but you know it is crazy to think she seems like anything other than Marjorie. She was cagey, though. It just can't be for any reason bad. At least, not betrayal bad. You inform her you are going out for lunch and to question a suspect, but this is only half true. You head back out onto the street. At first, you think the rain has ceased, but it's just eased off. It tickles your skin. You definitely feel sharper than the day before. Was that a firecracker? Who the hell is setting off sparks in this part of town? Two black guys seem engaged in a dance-off on the street corner near a hydrant. Last summer, there'd been a spat of arson incidents involving fireworks. Usually anything involving illegal fireworks would take you straight to Chinatown, but this had been the Ukrainians. But the use of firecrackers made it real hard to tell what was arson and what was just kids getting out of their depth, not used to the big guns. Yu Peng was unlikely to sell his precious fireworks anyway. He went all out for the Chinese New Year and had a fetish for them in general. You flow through the traffic. Things seem a little off today, like the air in the building and that thing with Marjorie. You almost missed the 2nd Street turnoff. How many fucking times have I? You muttered to yourself. You realized, because of the huge green billboard for perfume billowing above you. A small drone hovers on the corner, just above a noodle stand. They're just starting to soak into the cityscape now. You do a sneaky U-turn and are met with a litany of sonic abuse. Rightly so. You deserve it. But you have that old police ID should the abuse come from a cop you've never met before. Back on track, you soon see the opening for bench warmers on the right-hand side of the street. That old blue awning with the faded white lettering, the sight of which you now find comforting. You park in the side alley between the bench and the Korean grocers. You park in the alley. You have a badge for that, too. You get out of the car and slip into the warmth. Old Sammy is smoking in his usual place, the end of the bar closest the door, and he nods as you enter. You know this bar, and it knows you. What nobody from Sammy to the barflies to the regs know is that you have a Penguin Classic in your inner jacket pocket. And every time you leave this snow globe of smoke, the first place you head to is the East Side Park, the city's 2nd largest. There you read. There you reflect. But right now, forever and always, you drink. This is what you do in the afternoons. This is what you do. You're probably the only man, no women here, who drinks from the top shelf, but the others don't seem to mind. They're not all losers and lowlifes either. Some of them you can even imagine being friends with under different circumstances. In other times, some of them you do consider friends. The lines between acquaintances, pals, and friends is something you and Teller and Marjorie have debated many a time. One of those things everyone seems to have their own standards and ideas about. To the naked eye, the carpet seems held together by ash and snot and bloodshed. So long ago, it's surely forgotten now. Car horns and shouts slam against the threshold, but this dive bar cocoon is its own little nexus, a safe space in a harsh city. It's also the complete flip side of your only other public haunt. Old Billy Frank is there, in his usual spot, too, adjacent to the pool table, on a small table for one, just below the alley knockout poster. It's hard to imagine Billy Frank in any other place. He is someone who exists in this space. He's smoking a cigarette. It's warmer than usual today, and the music a little different. A steel guitar player and his instrument growl lazily across the bar, creeping between parsed out but largely hidden speakers. It's softer and better and more to your liking. It's what you'd expect to hear in a joint like this. It's what would play in the movie of a bar like this, and you wonder why it doesn't play all the time. The weight of the small, soft-back book is comforting and reassuring against your ribcage. Your weighty, half-a-cow wallet more so. Marco, the bartender, is also smoking a cigarillo in his case, and the plumes of gray and purple smoke meet satisfyingly in the apex above the bar and spiral off double helix into the muddy lights above. "It's always freaking wet," said, "but now it's cold too." It's like that movie recently. You give him the slight brow furrow. The serial killer one. It's a good movie, not like one of those shitty ones. He kills, but it's the deadly sins, and it's always raining, and the city's always green. Cities like this one for me when I got a hangover. "Every morning, then," retorts Marco. "Haha, in your pants." Marco smirks at the slight odd comeback. "There's another one like that now, too. Movie, I mean." "How did the Penguins do?" "How do you think they did? They blew. They always blow." "Getting better." "Still blowing." You laugh. You relax. Some tension eases from your shoulder. This warm little bar is as much comfort as the literature in its own strange little way. Your eyes drift to the left, and you consider a picture you always consider. It's one of those mirror pictures. This one's tinted gold and framed in black plastic. It's adjacent to the alley one and depicts a human boxer and a kangaroo. You think that somehow the kangaroo resembles Marjorie, but you can never explain why. You watch Billy Frank shuffle toward the flaking paint of the men's room door. What's wrong with him? As in, why does he look even more disconsolate than usual? Marco rolls the word around in his mouth, testing for flavor. Disconsolate, huh? You should be careful using words like that, brother. In this bar, I mean. You keep showing education, you might have to find a better class of watering hole. Maybe run down the street to Yates' Wine Bar. Suck a bag of dicks. Haha, haven't heard that in a while. My kid used to love to quote that line. Fuck, whatever happened to CK? They fucking buried him. That's what happened. You drain your glass to punctuate the sentiment. A gentle slam down. Why, though? Popular, wasn't he? Because, Marco, although the truth might taste good in a belly full of lies, it doesn't sit well with the general public. Hey, fucking men, brother. As he says this, the bartender drops his cloth, spins on his heels, and takes down a top-shelf bottle. Brandy. Louis XVIII. Places it down on the bar with respect. Reverence, even. Let's drink to the truth seekers. I'll drink to that, but just one, mind you, because I've got to get back to the office and do some stuff. Don't worry, you're not getting more than one of these for free. Hell, I don't even like selling the shit. As Marco pours the amber into a fresh glass, the light of the bar too dull to catch its glint, your eyes return to the men's room door with the scarred red paint. You're desperate for Billy to return. His absence makes you uneasy, and the thought of him not returning, nervous. But this makes no sense. A honking horn, followed by a shout, draws you to the opposite side of the bar, to the window. People, too many people, pass, and a forgotten line from an enigmatic novel strikes your brain from nowhere. What's outside the window? You are stopped from pondering the question by the clinking of Marco's glass against your own. He smiles a smile that doesn't belong to his face. The smile of a man who has accepted, with better-than-average grace, that were things just a tiny bit different, he would not be pouring your work-delaying ass a drink right now. He would be famous. He would be something somewhere. He would be a better man. To the truth-seekers. To the truth-seekers. You say this with conviction and confidence and a small splash of love for both Marco and his top-shelf liquor. The Courvoisier is remarkable. You never did tell me why the old boy's so glum. His cat died? Disappeared. But yeah, probably the same thing. He lets it roam. Probably fucked itself to death or fell under a car wheel. He loves that thing. Yep, that thing loved him. And that thing is all the poor bastards got left. They can stray for days, though, can't they? Weeks even, then pop back up for the canned food. Well, I'm pretty sure old Billy feeds it whatever he's having, plus beer. Damn, this is a good Courvoisier. He really give it beer? The beer cheers you up a little. He marinades it in a lovely sprinkling of beer, and that cat loves it more than a gay man would love a bag of dicks. Well, you raise your glass. Here's to whatever gets you through then. Billy Frank returns, order restored, at least for now. The conversation stops and starts and spreads out. Sports return, bad jokes, smiles, frowns and judgments, and each reference makes more sense to some than others. A too long silence finds you with your eyes glued to the edge of the bar closest to the toilets. It's got a chunk of wood missing. It has always had a chunk of wood missing, but it's different now. Wet and decayed. Rot. You see one tiny bug crawling around its rough edges and imagine 1,000 more. 1,000,000 below the surface. You take Billy's seat beneath the ubiquitous poster. The group warms up. Some men smoke faster today, others more slowly. Everyone drinks the same, and you are lost in a cloud of smoke and opinions of Muhammad Ali and mariachis and verbals that never quite erupt. That famous picture on the wall sparks conversation. Best damn fight I ever seen. Here we go. You weren't there, too young. You don't know. You don't know what it was like back then. I ever tell you about those two pimps I saw fighting in the Walmart car park? I swear to God, Sammy, if you ever tell that story about learning honor from a pimp one more time, I'm taking my butt out onto the street, where the cat piss belongs. All this makes you recall an article you once read, which said that the working of the brain was organized like drug dealers in Albuquerque. Information was compartmentalized, but capable of migrating when necessary. You find your kitty cat yet, Frankie? The old man winces, a blow struck but not intended. He swallows before he explains. She'll come back when she gets hungry. I got some tuna just for her. Some nice salmon, too. When you last see it? Fire escape, round about Thursday. I seen some fucking kids about, but don't think they done nothing. She'll turn up. You ask your neighbors. Marco's questions causes a strange silence. You need to piss, but want to hear the old man's response. Neighbors ain't seen shit. I don't know my neighbors. He's right, though. Best fight. Best damn fight. You are reading The Great Gatsby in the park. This is the second largest in the city, and it was built around the time of Mayor Powell's inauguration. You have your back to the skyscrapers and are looking across a large sand pit to the other side of the park. 3 young boys are playing a game you remember from your own childhood in the sand. This proves a distraction that occasionally takes you out of your book. Their mother sits on the bottom of a slide, chatting to another young woman as she keeps an eye on them. The park is quiet today, mainly on account of the weather. The rain seems to have eased off to allow you to enjoy the classic. Of all the interruptions you have heard of this novel over the years, the most compelling came from the most unlikely place. Yet in spite of its origins, it resonated so much that every subsequent reading has been filtered through it, and at some point you have come to believe that the theory was your own original thought. A man sitting alone on the adjacent bench and reading a newspaper wears a hat identical to the bookkeeper's. You have observed him wearing it whenever he enters or exits his shop. The bookkeeper was never meant to be any kind of suspect. It was the purple sign that led you there. The symbol had appeared all over Samira's room and web history, scrawled in notebooks and underneath drawers. When you went to interview her best friend, she even had it on a t-shirt, though she claimed she had no idea of the meaning. Do you know what every little thing on every t-shirt for every band you like means? The only data you could dig up on them, the flyer in your glove box. So you thought you'd take it to an expert. You were simply looking for specialists in the occult and esoteric symbols and books. Teller had put out a soft inquiry on who was good for that kind of thing, and his name had come up. So you scheduled an appointment with him, not a suspect, so no need to catch him off guard, at his store, where the 3 of you chatted for maybe half an hour. You found him to be friendly, forthcoming, and, despite your complete lack of knowledge, very credible. You soon get a sense for this in your line of work, where experts are everywhere. He even gave you both his personal number on a card in case you had any further questions, just in case anything new comes up. But the second you were back on the street, Teller said he had a hunch about this guy. You were feeling something too, not as strong as it is now, but it was there, growing. Then Teller's hunch led him to a background check and a record longer than your dick. Theft, assault, DUI, statutory rape, exposure to a minor, but entirely compartmentalized between 1970 and 1975. Not so much as a parking ticket either side. To have such a volume and array of charges entirely within a 5-year period is very rare for somebody of the bookkeeper's age, unless it's a youth record. But the bookkeeper's was during middle age, which is something else you learned from your background check. The bookkeeper is about 20 years older than either of you pegged him for. It's not as bright, and things seem different. A whole new cloud bank gathering. Things have changed with the boys. One of them has tired of the game, or had a minor spat with the other two, and the remaining players have started a fresh game. This one you don't recognize from childhood, or anywhere else. This one's just strange, not merely foreign to you, but just plain odd. Doesn't seem like a boy's game. To even try to describe it later will frustrate you. Someone watches you watching the children, and across the sand, someone watches them. Everybody seems to be watching each other today. Or is it just you? Thinking like a detective, a savage detective, fierce and true. Back into the past. Back into the past. A fiery window on the horizon distracts you from it all as it imbibes and releases the sun. But the longer you look at it, the more it starts to feel like another eye. This light makes its way through the pane, shifting its focus, and now that yellow eye is watching only you. A slight breeze ruffles your pages, and you decide it's time to move on. You have multiple crimes to solve. Traffic is thicker now, and when it does move, seems to move more slowly. You are reminded of the traits of your childhood station, how, when you waited on the platform alone, they seemed to allow you to determine their velocity. These objects in motion under your imagined cosmic strings as the autumnal leaves blew back and forth, and the cloud hands ticked regardless. The people on the sidewalks are indifferent to your daydream. They move like fire. Half the city looks familiar to you these days, every face a snapshot of déjà vu. The news peddler looks like a pederast you hauled in for carding a lifetime ago. The fat woman 10 steps down from him, a shoplifter in Macy's. The other half resembles a shadow. The rain is the rain. Then you suddenly catch sight of your Oriental brother at the pedestrian crossing, and your heart skips a beat. You know there's nothing special about his, just a bit of weird coincidence. But there's still something about the case, the one in his hand, and the one that has you wrapped around its little finger. The Pigman Story and the House Full of Weird Objects. The Pigman's voice was as gruff as he looked. Sometimes when he talked, it felt like I was only getting half the story. Wasn't sure whether he was withholding or I was missing half the words. The air around us was certainly murky, even for a poorly lit pub. His chubby hands fascinated me and sometimes distracted me from his story. Actually, I missed the setup, though. I can tell you it was definitely something to do with his wife, who was definitely absent now, if not absent at the time of the story. The Pigman had some neighbors he hated, despised even, but I can't remember why exactly. I remember fragments. Stepping on his lawn when mowing theirs, noisy, but only on one day, or very strange time, to be noisy, I mean. Also, incidentally, he told me something, just mentioned it really, about a missing boy. A strange, lovely boy everybody had loved, or almost everyone. And one day he just disappeared at a sleepover a few streets over. But this boy has nothing to do with the Pigman story, nothing to do with what I'm telling you now. So anyway, he hates these neighbors, the couple, straight, no kids. And meanwhile, his dog goes missing. One of those miniature horse of a dog. Those fuckers that used to hunt lions with. Huge and red and strong and mean, too. And at first he thinks it's been stolen. Because, well, you know what some people are willing to pay for pedigree dogs. I had a rescue once. Okay, you're right. Back to the topic. The Pigman thought it had been stolen due to its size and desirability and monetary value. In fact, kind of a no-brainer if you think about it. Those types of dogs get nabbed all the time. Now, at this point, he did go into a lot of excruciating detail about how he broke in. Turns out our Piggy is a man of many talents and used to work successfully. He made a point of adding as a locksmith. But really, this was one of those points when I got distracted by his ugly hands or tried to remember where I was. The mystery pub was like its own strata, and I forgot. For most of the time I was in there, why I'd come to stumble upon it in the first place, about that postman foretold in dreams, and following him around the village, how I thought he'd gone in there. I also found myself drinking a black drink at some point that I didn't remember ordering. But anyway, the pig man breaks into his neighbor's abode, and he said it was very normal, routine, that he was a little annoyed that these people he hated so much had some of the same possessions and taste as him. A bedspread in a spare room, titles in the DVD collection, the same phone, same kettle, shit like that. Strange, really, when you think how uniform most people's houses are. The generic prints from IKEA, the acceptable color scheme. Funny he remembers that shit, really. But then the dude had just broken into a stranger's house for no rational reason, so. But there was a locked room, and he talked a lot about the locked room from his locksmith days and what they tended to mean. 3 main categories, he said, but they escape me now, but no signs of an actual dog, except a lead and a small chewable plastic bone toy. But he did concede that they, the couple, had owned a small white dog years back. Though they didn't have it long, 2 years tops, and it died. So this wasn't suspicious in itself. He went through the place, bit by bit, room by room, just like I did with the old lady's place later. The place was narrow, 3-story detached house, as we called them in merry old England. Yeah, exactly, a freestanding. In the middle, in an unlocked 2nd-story spare bedroom, he found a black box on a cheap plywood desk. Right in the center, perfectly placed, is actually how he put it. Perfectly placed. He said it was purposeful.
And no dirt. Smudges clutter around it. Nothing at all. It was shiny and perfect and purposeful and just there. And for reasons I can't tell you, mate, I thought it would be locked. I thought there's no way I'm getting in here, and at the same time something frightened me about what might be in there. For your eyes only, son, not for mine. But it was open, wide open, slid open like a virgin's panties.
And I remember Piggy kind of licked his lips when he said that, which constantly had that spittle kind of spit on them. The lower one did. Didn't mention that before. I mean, they call him a pig man for a reason. I wondered if somebody should be searching his house. He went on to tell me that inside that box was a single sheet of A4 paper, and he told me what was written on it, but all I can remember is that it was text. I keep trying to remember what it said, but can't. It's been driving me crazy, to be honest, that period when I was waiting to hear from Maurice about the offshore transaction. My mind kept coming back to it, like somehow the heart of my anxiety, the apex of it all, and would provide some type of lonely answer. The lacuna of my soul. I mean, it can't be relevant to all this, can it? A story I'm not sure is true, told to me in a place I'm not convinced exists. Right? Crazy. Bat shit. But either way, he finds the paper and then...
I put the paper back in the box, son. Had to, right? Otherwise, they'd have known I was there. Wish I hadn't now. I feel like it could have done me some good. The box was the only weird thing I had found up to that point, but obviously nothing to do with my dog. And I'm getting angry, too. Irritable. Angry as fuck that I had to break into this Muppet's place, and all I can find is a stinking piece of paper. I did see something odd, small but odd-like. Scribbling. Little pencil scribblings on the stair wall. You know, like you might see if someone was marking where to hang a skirting board or a picture hook. But these weren't those kind of markings. Too many symbols, low and silly shit to boot, smiley faces, little drawing of clouds and houses, but not kitty drawings either. You know, like those tossers who let their kids scrawl all over the walls because they're creative. Nothing fun about them at all, no color, adult doodlings. No, they weren't big. Like I said, a long, small row, a few inches high. A row a bit downstairs as well, in that hall. It's not exactly called the sun weird, though, is it? And the dog chew was meaningless because they used to have a dog. I was starting to give up. I was starting to feel paranoid. Thought about getting out while I still could. Because you got to bear in mind, son, this could have gotten me in some real trouble. Breaking and entering's no joke. Oh, don't worry about it, officer. I thought they had my ridgeback. Well, you're kind of ruining the suspense of the story there, son. You'll find out soon enough whether me and Sammy were ever united. But do I look a happy man? Ask yourself that first. I'm not here waiting for my friends. I drink alone. I'm halfway up those stairs at the top floor, trying to figure those weirdo doodlings when I think I've been rumbled. Very distinct door opening sound down below. Front door, I figure. I freeze up, and I'm more afraid than I expect. This isn't exactly my first rodeo. I was other things before I was a locksmith's son. I'm not sure if I'm statue, like 5 seconds or 5 minutes. But suddenly I exhale and I relax, and something tells me that everything is going to be all right. All of it, son. I used to worry too much about most things right up until I hit 40. But all the times I was stood on those stairs, I'd realized for a while that most things didn't matter. No, I didn't still think someone was in the house. I'm not saying I wouldn't have been bothered about getting caught. Fuck, son. There's worrying and there's concern. Oh, by the way, I can't place your accent. I've been meaning to ask, are you one of our North American cousins? Yeah, you're right. Story first, then we'll chat. The house is empty. What I heard did sound like a door. But I'm confident I'm alone. But still not confident that my instincts about Sammy's location are correct. I wonder if I've gone a bit barmy. But I decide I might as well take a look at the last part of the house. Get it over and done with quickly, but check it out. Who knows? Maybe I'll find something else. I haven't taken 3 more steps when I hear another noise, closer, louder, but just as distinct. A scraping, like something's up and down or across-like in one of the rooms. Scraping against the wall or the skirting boards. Not a person. I know it's not a person, and I'm doubtful that it's Sammy. But the noise is real, very real. My eyes are scanning, and it's like the thing's invisible. I can hear it, but not see it. And it's not like that in the walls sort of sound, creaking pipes and expanding floorboards. There's this big mahogany wardrobe, different to most of their furniture, and probably more expensive too. Definitely, actually, antique, more unique. Almost as wide as the room. It's 2 shades of brown, and the darker parts actually shine more. Beautiful bit of wood, actually. It's like looked after, but also the more you look at it, the more you realize how scratched it is. Doesn't ruin it as such. Some would say it gives it more character, like a bit of history in a piece of furniture, me. But regardless, I'm thinking surely they're not keeping my dog in that, evil bastards. But then again, he isn't running round their garden, is he? Bit blatant, that would be. So they gotta be keeping him somewhere. I approach, and I'm not afraid to admit I'm pretty scared. My heart is voting for flight. When I'm step or two away, I hear the noise again, nearly shit my pants. Probably locked anyway, I keep telling myself. It's probably locked anyway. It's not locked. First thing I notice.
By the way, he strings out the suspense here. I've been a bit mean about Piggy. To be fair to him, I've met far worse storytellers. He had a knack, some skills. He drains his pint, looked surreptitiously around the pub, like someone might be trying to record him, looks me in the eye, hard swallows, a few more beats for extra emphasis, and continues.
Is the backing of the thing, which is ridiculous considering what I'm about to tell you, but I do notice the sodding backing. It's all dark gray foam. Reminds me of what they put in camera boxes. You know, expensive tech equipment. You know, for them molded inlays. And you don't expect it, and it sticks out a mile. So I guess that's the reason why. Then I take in the shelves, one by one and all at once. Masks. Lots of masks. Compressed polystyrene mannequin heads wrapped in masks. Mainly kinky, all weird, bondage shit, or bondage shit meets Halloween. It freaks me more than if I'd found a sodding snuff movie or something like that. It was so organized, and you know.
Scaled, I suggested.
Yes, son. You've got a brain on you, son. Scaled is the word. Scaly bastards. Now, does this mean they're more or less likely to be behind Sammy? No fucking clue, but it makes me forget the noise for a second, till I hear it again, and step back so hard I end up falling on my flabby, bleeding ass. I really did, not ashamed to say. My eyes start searching frantically before I get up. Bottom first. Seems most likely, but it's still. Then I get on my feet and confirm this. I look around the rest of the room and wonder about behind the big fucker. Obvious solution, really. But I roughly eyeball how deep it goes and then check the side for dimensions. Doesn't seem to be any missing depth when you factor in the foam inlay and the natural back. So,
you got me. I say, or think I did, I don't really remember, but then I stopped being so slow on the uptake, and
bingo, son, bing and fucking go. The walls. Truth is, I'll admit it to you, though I never admitted it to anybody else before. I wanted to go back, but was afraid. Go when they were on holiday and see if there was anything in those walls. And I was thinking beyond Sammy by now, though I'm not sure what I was thinking. Imagine me there, letting rip with a sledgehammer or a crowbar. But the truth is, I bottled it. I mean, would you?
I said no, but refrained from adding, I wouldn't have broken in there in the first place. Wait, do you think they could have been suspects in the boy's disappearance? Huh. I think so much, and yet I didn't think of that at all. But then he never said anything about that. You think he would have? Shit, maybe old Piggy did it. Carved the likable adolescents up like so much long pig and ate bacon sandwiches every morning. Oh, sorry, officer. I wouldn't want to be in poor taste while you've got me chained up for unspecified charges. Yes, okay. I'm not chained, merely handcuffed. And I know I'm here for trying to steal the server HDD from the data center. But there's more going on here, much more. Don't try to tell me otherwise. This isn't my first rodeo. And on that note, level with me on something. You know, ever since you put me in that surprisingly comfortable cell, I've been trying to figure how you tracked me so fast, so smoothly. You had me on the facial rec software the entire time, didn't you? That was a lie, right? About killing the Mir 19 project? Nobody in my circles believed that you dumped that thing. Shit, Maurice even claimed he's seen the code. You had to be running something national, perfectly linked, I mean, even if you have full system access, which never happens. Not even the NSA. Somebody's always got to ask permission from somebody for something. But it's been like you installed a tracker on me at birth. Yes, the kid lived on their street. The guy with the lost dog and his neighbors who he suspected. You know, now that I think of it, the kid was a strange, incidental detail. I mean, like, hey, by the way, there's a missing kid, too. Funny shit. Like if Scrooge had been all about bookkeeping and Charlie said, oh, and by the way, there's some ghosts, too. No, he didn't say much more about the mask or what he thought they might be for. I think he was more perturbed by the matching bedspread, to be honest. I think they were basically all kinky sex masks, but the bizarro end of the spectrum. He said one was the classic bring on the gimp, but the rest were kind of horror, like one had a big carrot nose and one had a witch's hair. That's all that really sticks out now. Nothing happened next. Sorry it's so anticlimactic. I think we had some banal small talk. Obviously the American angle interested him, and I might have had 2 or 3 more drinks with him. He made it hard not to have another drink with him. You started to feel like it wasn't really an option. I didn't really remember how it ended or when I left, but I do remember that it was dark on the walk home. Full night. And I reflected a little on where or how the postie had done his disappearing act, but really none of that seemed important anymore. So since Esmeralda has gone somewhere and I have struck out on my little spy mission, I figure why not explore the rest of the house a little, see if the rest of it is as lame and creepy as the dining room and the TV. Oh boy, you don't even know. You don't even know. No, I didn't go through her drawers. Well, kind of. And yes, before you say it, yes, I certainly had broken that unspoken contract of respect that I spoke of earlier. But hey, at least I admit to my bads. Own my shit. Can your fucking paymaster say the same thing? What does that mean? Are you seriously asking me that question, officer? Wow. Well, let me tell you what I found. Well, firstly, let me remind you that I didn't know the house that well. Remember, I'm in the basement 24/7, and I'd rather be there because, well, what's this old dame's house got to offer me except a crappy old television set? And it's really darkly lit most of the time, so I never really appreciated just how old it is. Like glum and chintzy, dead grandmothers, yada yada. Gloomy anaglypta wallpaper everywhere, or at least when it wasn't wallpaper, the worst shade of lime imaginable, though that could have just been the light. And it was way more cluttered to boot. I don't think this isn't a joke. I generally don't think I stood in the hallway long enough for my eyes to adjust to the light and see all the shit that was there. I was just in and out for my dinner, expressway to nutrition. I'd never spent enough time in the rest of the house for my eyes to adjust. But now all this stuff is leaping out of the shadows, telephone directories and lamps and antiques of dubious vintage. And it walked the line, too. Like, it wasn't full hoarder. Never go full hoarder. Just a kind of borderline eccentric. Plus, it was normal at the end of the day. It was normal. It didn't really get freaky until I hit up the drawers and chests and stuff. Oh, yes, chest, plural. She had a few of them. Although I didn't really know if any of it means anything, I may have bigged up the weirdness too much now I think of it. Like I say, it walked the line. For example, on the dining room, on the top left shelf of the cabinet, next to some old-looking crystal glasses, there's a jade statue of a puma. One half of the room was normal, but in the back corner, near where I usually sat, there was a statue of a cherub which looked like it belonged outside. Plus his dick seemed a little on the large side for me, about ×4. I found 2 drawers full of old bodybuilding magazines from the 1950s in those cabinet drawers. Big muscles and bigger swimsuits. I think maybe the old gal was using them to flick the bean. Also, at the back of some of these drawers and stuff, there was scratched in messages, or occasionally written in black marker, but I'll get back to that. There was, stuff you wouldn't expect of her. Random Blu-rays, mainstream stuff, but nothing you could imagine her watching. And an old defunct home video formats, video discs. I'm guessing you're not familiar. They're like big caddies with big discs inside. Really prehistoric. And at the back of one cupboard, behind lots of papers, accounting spreadsheets, which made no fucking sense to me whatsoever. Was some type of video I'd never seen before. Not sure that it was one. More organic looking than plastic. Wrong size and a head that resembled teeth. Dog-type teeth along the top where the flap would usually be. No, I wasn't tripping. That was to come later. Also, she had this creepy little spare room, like a box room, and it just had filing cabinets and a desk in there, and the desk drawers were full of lists of seemingly random words that reminded me of crypto recovery keys. And this made me think of the Pilgrim's story and the paper he found, although I don't remember what was on that. Yeah, I forgot about that. So there were a few, but I only remember 2 clearly. One said, "The path you are following grows in the dark and will soon reveal itself." And the other simply said, "Time is luck." Maybe it was the mad ramblings of her deceased hubby. Perhaps one day he said, "Look, if we don't upgrade this fucking TV, I'm tying a noose." And then when she didn't take him seriously, he cashed that check. I don't know, but certainly stunk of breakdown. Doesn't seem likely that they were written by somebody who lived there before, because she'd clearly lived there a long fucking time. Oh, and there was an attic, but it wasn't accessible. It was a long time before I took Bob up on his offer. The days were stretched and murky and gray, and sometimes they went around and around and around in a consummate circle. They stretched out, and my dreams were too long. Sometimes I got confused, and sometimes I got lost, even in the old lady's house, even in my basement room. Sometimes I wasn't even sure what country I was in, and I started to remember random, useless things. At least it all seemed random. And I kept thinking of people I hadn't seen for decades or cared about in the first place, and obsessed on old trivial events. I also began to misremember Maurice, friend becoming foe, another reversal of the mirror. I got another one of those emails I mentioned, but this one wasn't so tedious, just odd. I'd have called paranoia or shenanigans, but this guy was pretty legit. Credible. I certainly never had him pegged as a liar, and he was as balanced as the next man. There was something about this story he told me. At first, why even mention it, but Then it grew stranger and stranger in my mind, bigger. Maybe I'll tell it to you if we find ourselves kicking back with a few brewskis when this is all over, when the dust has settled. Then a blessing and a curse occurred all at once. The drugs arrived in the post. The drugs I hadn't ordered. It had been so long with this particular brand of brain candy, at least, that I didn't even recognize. I thought to begin with that I was looking at a couple of dried-up baby geckos, like gecko jerky, then some kind of tree bark. But I looked a little closer, and I had a little snuff, and realized I was looking at my old friend Psilocybe cubensis, or one of his/her many similar friends. And not, by the way, thankfully, my old foe Amanita. But that's a story for another day, and you federal types are kind of funky when it comes to gifts of the earth. You people will send a man to prison for 20 years for 20 grams. Madness! I recognize them as magic mushrooms, like I say, but what I also noticed for the first time is how, in a small dried-out doses at least, they smell and taste like chocolate. Weird, eh? Anyway, the headline is, Old Blank Didn't Order No Shrooms. Wouldn't have done anyway, not out of respect for the old woman. What, after all, are the fucking odds of interception? But because I didn't want to be tripping down there in that dank basement, 5, 10, 15 years out of practice. And also, it just didn't really appeal. A thorium. Now, that's a drug I really wish they had never synthesized, because I could do that stuff night and day. But you will feel its significance within about a week. It messes with your sense of time. Judgment? Well, but time, man. The ticking of the clock. And that eventually makes you doubt space. But I digress. Point is, I didn't order them, so it freaked me out a little when they came. I was thinking, well, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. I'm thinking, does someone know I'm here? Is this a trick? A message from Maurice? I'm leaning in hope towards Maurice, and I'm running the numbers to try and ascertain whether anybody else could possibly know I'm there. You can't really get a bad batch of mushrooms, only the wrong mushrooms. But it was still undeniably weird. Also, and check this out, because this was no thorium memory backlog, the name, the fake plausible deniability name on the label, Tom Pikeman, the main character, the hero, if you like, one of my fave series of childhood books. So I'm spooked as a motherfucker. But I'm also bored as a motherfucker, even with silly quests to spy on postmen, and all my endless bad dreams and bad decisions. So I wash them down with some coffee. Weird how these things creep up on you, also exactly the same and yet always unexpected. There's a movie that gets it just right. The wall of pictures I mentioned earlier was crooked and droopy. The pictures, I mean, not the wall. It was just like something out of a Dali picture, another cliché. But I stood up and noticed that and realized I was officially tripping. I knew, seen it before, got the t-shirt. I didn't fancy spending my evening watching things bend. It's for another time and mindset. No, it wasn't really a bad trip per se. I couldn't put too fine a point on it without boring you to tears, but suffice it to say, I walked around the rim with the precipice only 2 steps away. But some steps were fun and euphoric. Kind of. I went outside and found the night changed. They had warned me that the moon would look strange, and it did. I stared at a nearby car and distant street sign. I grew paranoid of the neighbors, though of course that was only a practical concern. Wouldn't be the best time to converse for the first time. I saw an ant that barked like a spider. I suddenly noticed a sonic weave about my head, a no doubt dull domestic conversation about 7 doors down amplified into a stadium chorus. When I was young, I'd actually entertained the notion that the brain was being effectively rewired, like turning a dial on a radio to tune into another station, and that new frequency wasn't simply a distortion or a hallucination, but seeing an alternative reality, or something closer to an objective one. But now I see that's nonsense, isn't it? I retreated for the warmth and familiarity of my basement room, but instead of needle and spoon, I had cigarettes and shots of whiskey and failed attempts to ease my trip and calm my nerves. I had video games, new and old, and I had Sex Hub and Blu-ray. I avoided the social media BS, no time for chit-chat. I watched a film, a despised and mediocre one that I actually already abandoned 5 months back on a streaming platform. The 4K picture was the main draw in my current state. I watched a film pitched at adults, but surely designed for children, as faggy Hollywood ponces ran around in tights and capes, blasting each other with ray guns on a lava planet like Marvin the Motherfucking Martian. But this time the CGI histrionics took on a new, darker, and more epic tone. The entire world beyond the screen, beyond my reach. It could have been a black hole dragging me to a dark quadrant of the cosmos. It could be a personal hell for everybody. Other things began to bend like picture frames, door lintels, cupboard edges, taps, and tiles. Why would things be that crooked? Why would they hide their true dimensions and crookedness from me? Unless reality was hiding all the time. Long and short, far and wide, in the walls, like Bob and his slime, like Bob and his impossible demands. Food was typically uncooperative, peanut butter moving around in my mouth like sluggish spiders. I took a bath for the sure fuckery of it. I stared for a very, very long time at a lone candle flame, which became a fire. For a moment I recalled the lava world and imagined the future. In my dream, the pigman grew a pear, dragged that 2-ton antique away from the hidden wall, and went to work with a crowbar, followed by his bare hands. He didn't find anything alive, nothing to explain that impossible noise, but as plaster gave way and the seemingly pointless hole grew and grew, white shapes revealed themselves, and then these shapes revealed themselves to be bones. He soon realized, however, that they weren't real bones, but plastic fakes. But somehow these plastic exoskeletons were more sinister than the real thing, and there was no dog amongst them. There was something wrong with the scene, plain wrong and bad, and it filled Piggy/me with a sense of doom and existential dread, some collision with fate. Last moments of the dream story were just flickers, like inserts in a film. He lay there, I think, bathed in moonlight, clutching a small femur, but really none of this is certain. None of it was certain at all. Not in abduction territory. As you open the door, you're once again struck by the way Crothers dresses, and how subtly at odds it is with the rest of him. The shiny, but not quite too shiny, trousers, the cravat, the expensive watch, the slightly grubby shoes which slightly offset the entire ensemble and threatens to throw it off balance. But then that was Crothers all over. Just when you think he's going to step over the edge, he pulls you back and restores balance, almost as if the entire thing had been a carefully choreographed act from the start. Like with the murder suspect he threw against the glass in the interrogation room hard enough to crack. Also, one of the best cops you ever worked with, which is why he is one of the few you are still in touch with. You offer him a coffee, he declines and sits down. With Crothers, as much for his personality as his cop instincts, you always feel he knows a little more about your shit than you'd like him to. And this loss of control is always a little disconcerting. He glances out the window, seemingly seeking inspiration or else fighting something off, something small but inside him. He smooths out his trousers and clears his throat, grins. My ex-wife, man, my goddamn ex-wife. If you had said to me, say 7 years back, that at the age of 50 I'd still be single and hung up on a woman I hate, that my marriage was the worst 7 years of my life, and that's coming from a man who worked both vice and homicide. You don't know what to say to your friend. You've never been good at responding when people open up. But you think of the nurse and the woman she reminded you of. You think of your own shortcomings in that department. There is a short, uncomfortable silence before Crothers changes direction. Now I gotta tell you this, baby. I don't know what it's worth or what it's gonna mean to you, but I gotta tell you. Is it about one of my cases? No, don't get too excited. It might be nothing. Just, network information. Okay. I spent Tuesday chasing a meth head bail skipper all about town, and I finally cornered him to some east side tenement. The fool nearly leapt the 5th story. But when we finally get the rat in a cage, he tells us a few worthwhile things. One is that there's a major shipment of H coming into the East Pier, and then he mentions the McFrenzy brothers within that context. Buying or selling? We don't know yet, maybe brokering, but he also said his buddy told him. So but he reckons that the leprechauns have also moved into the synthetic fentanyl business. Isn't fentanyl already synthetic? Well, then this shit is more synthetic. Well, that doesn't sound good. No, it does not. A silence, then. How's your missing girl case going? The one with the exotic name? Well, we are thrown for a loop, to be real with you. We is you and Teller, I presume. Yeah, so? Actually, I'm not sure what you do and don't know, but basically we are working a case for one of the Yu brothers. He had an interest in one of his brother's interests. They're kind of semi-estranged, right? But still have to cooperate. Yeah, exactly. Especially against foreign threats like the aforementioned leprechauns. So that case is okay. Not too hard, but not too interesting either. We were getting somewhere, but the missing girl case is a mystery with not many hard leads. However, we like this creep who owns a bookshop in Trenton for it. Like me and Tell have never had a hard-on of quite this intensity for the same suspect before. What's his name? Ivan Trakowski. He a Rusky? Yeah, in extraction. There ain't nothing Slavic about him, though. More your kind of waspish pagan creep. Waspish pagan, hey? Well, something along those lines. He certainly isn't scary, like a Russian. Now I think about it, I can think of a Russian or Pole or something like that owns a bookshop or two. Maybe some other business, and he was questioned by somebody for something 3-4 years back. Really? You remember anything else? Because really, anything else would help right now. Ain't gonna remember the name, if that's what you mean. And not nothing else, either. You got a picture? You grab a picture from a file you keep in the bedroom and hand it to Crothers. Fuck yeah, that's the cat. Don't know why I remember him so well. He's only a little funny looking at the end of the day. But yeah, that's him. I'm not saying he murdered any girls or nothing, but that was who I was thinking of. Wait, you said more than one bookshop? Maybe half a dozen businesses, man. Like I say, without speaking to Tom, I couldn't tell you too much. Well, I could really use speaking to Tom then, because what I didn't finish telling you was that there might be a direct link between the missing girl case, this Ivan asshole, and the work we were doing for Yu Peng. Crothers furrows his brow. Really? That does not sound like typical runaway or abduction territory. Yeah, but I'd rather not say too much right now. This case has the type of momentum where it runs off on its own two legs, and I'm starting to feel like I'm chasing a mirage. You finish your coffee, glance out the window as if for inspiration. I could do with speaking to Tom, though, if you're willing to put us in touch. Of course, baby, consider it done. Tell her unearth anything juicy. I remember that boy had a way with an angle. He had one, but I wasn't in awe of it, and it meant one of us going to Montana, and I couldn't rightly justify the expense. What was it? Samira and her best friend's favorite band. There's a connection between them, and a piece of evidence, but all we could unearth was a flyer and a rumor that the founding members are from a small town there. Which one? The bass player and the drummer. Ah, percussion and bass, nasty combination. Crothers' beeper goes off, and he gets up like a man programmed. I gotta go, man. Development's on the meth head front, but real quick, we gotta do it. We got to. Oh, shit, man. It was a tradition when we worked homicide together, brother. But I'm getting to... Nah, it's a tradition now because we did it back then. Wasn't no tradition back then, but it is now, which is why we gotta do it. Don't worry if it's good. Shit, use an old one if you really got to. But I feel like I don't get my joke, then I'm gonna jinx myself and my whole damn day. Officer of my standing gets jinked, could take the whole city down with me. You want to be responsible for a synthetic fentanyl outbreak? No, sorry. Make that epidemic, motherfucker. You laugh. Crothers is the only one other than Teller who can consistently make that happen. I'll go first. That fat slob of desk sergeant gave me some gold the other day. How do you circumcise a Jewish redneck? I'm all ears. Kick his sister in the jaw. Fuck. That's actually... Fuck, Crothers. Not pulling punches today. How you like them apples? Jesus. Well, I set the bar. Come raise it, baby. You hesitate because your heart is no longer in this game of crude one-upsmanship. And you struggle because you really don't have many jokes. Your life is your job, and the little bit of socializing you do with Crothers, Teller, and Scion. Teller has no end of jokes, and Scion wouldn't remember one if you tattooed it to him, which is probably for the best because he couldn't tell a joke to save his life. Okay, well, this is old, so you probably have heard it, but here goes. A pederast is taking a little girl through the woods, and she's sobbing the whole time. And she's stumbling and crying and getting understandably hysterical, and eventually the pederast, who's been the strong silent type up until now, says, I don't know what you're crying about. I've got to go back through here alone. Judging by Crothers' bellowing laughter, it turns out he had not heard it after all. A few hours later, after the sun has sunk, you find yourself propped up in your favorite bedtime reading position. The book in your hands, Bright Lights Big City. Your momentum was broken by an unnecessary notification from your smart home system and you are now reflecting upon the last scene you read, visualizing it in your mind when something clicks out of nowhere and rocks you back in your seat. The woman, the blurred one with her back to the camera in photo 1, the one that gave you a pure hunch. She's moving about the place, and meanwhile, photo 3 shows an unoccupied terminal, which could mean that that person was the one looking at the vanished website, the pictures having been taken far too close together to be different occupiers. Also, whoever had left that screen on had either forgotten to sign out or was still in the building. She didn't lock the screen because she knew her task wouldn't take long at all. Fetching a coffee, perhaps. A shiver runs down your spine. You grab your phone and dial teller. Engaged. You dial again immediately, and this time he answers. "There you go again, boss, in sync like a couple of fairies." I think that kind of language was stopped by government decree around 2020. "Why you calling? Forget your milk money or something?" You first. "Okay, your wish. A small update on the hospital. They found a strange knife at the back of the janitor's closet." "Strange how?" "Just a little weird, in an ornate antique kind of way. Better you just see it. Could be nothing, but they're dusting it for prints." "Our usual uniformed informant tell you that?" "Yeah." "Okay. You?" "Speak to him, your friend in NSA, I mean. Speak to him today and see what you can do. Don't push too hard well, shit, you know what you're doing. Feel him out. But just don't be too pushy. If we can get this thing, on it, hoss." A sense of excitement grows between the notes of the disconnected phone line, because if they are the same person, this might explain your gut feeling, the one that refused to leave you, that this person was significant or at least up to no good. Before, it was just a hunch, the strongest and most inexplicable you ever had, but still just a hunch. But now you have a hunch connected to an anomaly, a vanished website, and you wonder why it took you so long to see something that was hiding in plain sight. You wonder what else you can't see. You try to return to your evening reading, but now the cult novel from the 1980s presents you with yet another reflection of now. Passage that could have been written in the 1980s or tomorrow. Another sign that Armageddon is eternal, the same old cycles of ideology and ignorance, and how time and again the species refuses to learn its lessons. As you drift off, you are unsure whether or not to take comfort from this. Does it let you off the hook? No need to worry no more or break your heart? It's hard to say, but you try to lean towards the former. As you sleep, you have a nightmare of beautiful and daunting properties. The people have finally awoken. They have tossed off the shackles of eternity. Their puppet masters are on the run, but their choices are now unparalleled, and the entire core has split in two. The darkening sky rains down fiery cars, whilst the periphery glints like a sea of glass. Bob finally makes his appearance. After the maybe dream, the trip entered a fresh phase. It was weird because I really thought, judging by both experience and my clock, that it was winding down. I'm sure even a couple of buttoned-up federal straights like you can appreciate that it's hard to describe something so abstract in concrete terms. So I'll just say it was all colder and starker. Darker, maybe, too. And the house was super eerie. Eerie, Indiana eerie. Silent. I couldn't, in my new state of mind, even remember if that bag of bones was rattling around upstairs or glued to the TV or not. It was hard to imagine a world above me, let alone those 5 weird rooms I explored just days before. I knew for sure I was in no state to wander around that mausoleum of a home. I stared at an object for a really long time, and the edges became less and less, well, defined, and it gradually merged into the wall behind it, and soon, or not so soon, I found myself staring at a blank canvas. Not a literal one. My entire field of vision was a blank canvas, and I traced a line that grew from below, a fine dark dividing line, a hairline fracture in reality that split my world. But I didn't recognize its significance, was not startled or scared until it began to widen. Before I knew it, it was a foot-wide dark strip. I rubbed and closed my eyes, and it stayed put. I was scared, for want of a better word. Tried to tell myself I was dreaming, but got lost in the middle of the sentence. Little silver dots sparked off that blank space, and soon I was looking at the wall again, but it was blank now. No shelves or knickknacks or stains, and it zippered open. Like I said near the start of my ramblings, it fucking zippered open, and the bricks parted like the seas for Moses. Yeah, I know why you're looking at me that way. It must have been a dream, right? I was walking down an invisible corridor and came to a big solid bastard of a door, like I didn't know, like you might imagine in a Russian submarine. 6 inches thick and solid steel, and one of those wheel lock things, whatever they are called, and a square mesh window near the top, about eye level, but too fucking grimy to see a single thing inside. Nada, bupkis. And I go in. There's a lot of stuff here. Maybe some of the stuff from above, the cherubs and eagles, etc., or maybe just reminded me of that stuff that I don't remember. Then there's what I can't forget. Sat on a high-backed wooden chair, carved, is a thing that reminds me of that thing in the old TV show where the comedian skeleton is telling horror stories. You know, like a puppet, and he giggles all the time like a meth head. Well, he's like that, but real and scary and dark, a skeleton, human-sized, fully grown, but maybe a few extra bones here and there. And some things are out of proportion. He's covered in slime from head to foot, kind of translucent, and it smells, and that's why I christened him Bukkake Bob. Your friend looks confused, officer, and I'm not explaining. Bob's eyes are black or empty with little white pinpoint at their centers. His fingers are a little too long, and he stretches them out before me. I recall the Medusa from my dream. He speaks in a foreign tongue. What did he say? What did that slimy little motherfucker, that nightmare-inducing piece of shit, say? He said that I hadn't fallen for the calling, and there was still time for me to release the truth. But I must journey further than I ever had before and risk everything. He then pointed to the clock, a very tall desk clock, the only other thing I can remember seeing clearly in that room, of all the objects I mean, and said that. And I'm going to give it to you word for word this time. The doomsday clock is winding down. Others are lost too. There's nothing to fear because there is nothing at all. Time is luck. Go to the location and retrieve the box of truth before the clock stops. And now I see the clock for real, and it's scarier than its owner. 2 feet of elongated, glossy bones, 3 different faces. One moves forward very slowly, the other backwards so fast the hands blur. One appears still, but that one has the most archaic symbols around its face. The hands, all the hands, are like tarantula legs, and I couldn't even tell you if that's a simile. I don't even know if it was really there or not. Yeah, you got me. I believed enough to go to the location. Good question. What location, right? Well, I'll give you a hint. We met there. I found it in the morning or whenever I woke up from sleeping one off. It was on my PC screen, stamped out in a Word document I don't remember opening. 1 page, large capital letters. Phoenix Reset Data, Electrum Industries, Ernest Road, Mansfield, Nevada, 10010 USA. Naturally, I Google it and find out it's a real place. But then I guess all things considered, you guys are more than aware of that. But an address doesn't prove magic, doesn't prove anything, except maybe the old dame thought every day was the 1st of April. So I go upstairs, get some tea, confirm that yes, she is indeed away somewhere, watch the rain, watch the birds, got that nice come-down warmth and empty-headedness. And suddenly my future doesn't seem so bleak or so confusing. That is until I sit down at my desk to finish my tea and check my email, and next to my Bitcoin ticker, propped up against my Star Trek insignia mug, I see a long bone. A bone drenched in slime. Reno and Tinto. Christ's sake, you drive a hard bargain, the mole replied in a manner consistent with much of this exchange. He merely blinked. You are, though, you bugger. You really are. KKK. If I can tempt you with my little metal shirt, he said, tossing the used bulletproof vest aside, I'm going to have to tempt you with my numerous unos. That's old world speak for number ones. The mole smirks at this. He has enough education about the old world from the village to know that this isn't true. But he liked the bizarre little stranger, though be it only a little and reluctantly. KKKKK, what about? The funny little man with the tin hat and the torn sack and the almost non-existent knees spins on his petrified log of a seat and rummaged down more through his sack of goody-goods. This time he extracted a torn and muddy magazine of semi-clothed and unclothed bodies. This will get your bloods pumping out there in the desert, bit of the old in and out, yes? Yeah, you tell me you're on a quest, but you're still a bloody man, ain't you? The mole shook his head and felt a smile creeping up his face for the first time in memory. Fine, to be honest. Here he again emitted his dry carnival laugh. You know, Tinto, we'll miss that, won't we, boy? At this point he fussed with his dog for approximately the 100th time. The mole again glanced down at the dog's middle and was finally curious enough to ask, Isn't that a girl dog? Bloody girl, you say? Which is what they used to say back before the falling sunny. But believe me, you old Tinto might be a girl dog, as you put it, but she ain't nobody's bitch. Any of those nihos in the inner wastelands or the purple zone tried to rape my Tinto, she'd chew their bloody balls off. And not the flavor either. Not just send out a message. Oh, no. Wouldn't lower herself to swallow, though, would you, honey? At this, the dam broke, and the mole's facial twinge grew into a fully fledged laugh. Laughing now, are we? Didn't think you had it in you, to be honest, son. Anyway, Tinto really wants that pain stick you got there, too. She ain't getting any younger. She, me only protection, and she don't want to see her sire killed in battle, or mugged by a bunch of bleeding maggots, little bleeding scavengers. Rob blind you, they will, those cunts. Worse than those fucking trading shacks. Reno fell silent and focused on the dirt for a second, shifting his ad hoc leather and bark shoes around in the dirt as if for inspiration. All right, Kay, I'm a reasonable bugger, so I know not to push it when I'm not welcome. My lastly offer this will be, but strap yourself in, son, strap your ass in. He stood, did a little pirouette, stamped his feet in the dirt, moved his sack into the front of him, and yanked it open. Voila! He exclaimed, holding up a chunk of square and charred plastic, black in color, and the likes of which the mole had never seen. "What's that?" "Ah, curious, eh? I got you now. Right bloody curious bugger, you are." "Well?" "It's like those bookie wooks that they used on you back in your village, when you said you sat in circles with the other kiddies. Except this ain't no teaching, and you viddy instead." "What do you mean?" the mole asked as he stretched out his arm for the object. "Oh, no you don't, you bugger. Not so bloody fast. You got your eyes now, right?" The mole waited him out. It didn't take long. "KK, it's a show like me and you now, except not the two pricks sitting by the fire. Maybe in that one of them ain't such a tight ass, and hands over the bloody pain stick, since he's on a fancy quest and shouldn't need such a nasty little weapon. Hard quest shouldn't require such nastiness." "How does it work?" "You see, a square, flat-like, but bloody real all the same, like watching the fire, but way more interesting. Thing is, you need a magic box to play it. There used to be millions of them. Lazy cunts didn't do much else before the falling. You never learned that in your circle jerk. Teacher must have been a bit of a galar." More dry laughter from Reno and brow furrowing by the mole followed. "Let me see it, Reno, and I'll consider the exchange fairly." "Oh, will we now? Okay, use my bloody name for the first time. Now you want something, I see." Reno handed the videotape to the mole in slow motion as Tinto barked a high-pitched bark. The mole turned the videotape around in his hands, sniffed it, and held it up to the faltering sun. The top was melted, the flap no longer functional. He handed it back to the small-bodied man who had rolled, along with his medium-sized black-and-white dog, out from under a bush like a pair of phantoms just after the mole set up camp for the night, knowing that he was finally somewhere close to the abode of the first and most elliptical of the masters. The orange sky had darkened since then. The thing makes a lot of sense, thought the mole. After all, Varana had taught him so much about the transition from the dreaming to the mirroring that took place about 30 years before the falling. How many of the people's pre-falling activities were second-hand, and also how much behavior was mirrored and repeated, again and again and again. Everything reflected back except the cycle itself. And he had been told that the gaps in his education were many. Varana was not a proud woman, just one who never sold herself short, and had always reminded the young mole to do the same. "It's a strange object, to be sure, and I'd like to see one of these magic boxes it partners with. But sorry, this is no substitute for a pain stick." After a brief look of pained disappointment, "Well, to be fair, I guess you can't exactly batter a marauder over the head with it, now can you? And truth is, I'd miss it awful, so I would, wouldn't we, boy?" Reno placed all the various objects he had failed to tempt the mole with away, and resecured his sack behind a rock. A pot made of an object neither understood bubbled between them, a crude meat simmering in God only knows what, but the aroma was comforting to them both, and neither had ever smelt real food. The mole had found the flesh almost impossible to chew, but he did need to swallow. A gap had been closed in his belly, and he was grateful to the stranger for that. "So, what'd you trade him for? You must have had something pretty good or weird to start with." He didn't want to trade. The words hung in the air for a while, losing more meaning than they accumulated. "So, how'd you get it?" "Nothing." "You steal it then, did you?" He didn't want to trade, and only meant me harm. A silence. Reno suddenly spasmed, spitting his semi-masticated meat into the darkening sky. "You what? You killed the bastard?" Well, fuck. Tinto says fair play, but didn't know you had it in you, son. You sure you're on the heart quest? Sounds more like a soul quest, to be honest, son.
Reno yammered, punctuated by airway-clearing coughs. A short silence followed, but the mole knew before Reno broke it that there would be more.
How'd you do 'em? Short-circuited him with his own stick? I've heard they can bugger the heart if it's held in place long enough.
No, I took it from him afterward. Reno spotted the slight shifting of the mole's right foot and the downcasting of his eyes which followed.
Oh, fuck.
It was no more or less than he deserved.
Gonna kill you, was he?
He tried. It was in his heart before I entered his shack.
Probably why they always have so many more skulls than everybody else. Skulls be real valuable out in the Northwestern Territories.
Then, for a short while, nothing filled the desert air, almost black now, but the slightest movement of 3 bodies, labored breath, and the gentlest of growls. The fire also, of course, always the fire.
So can I ask exactly what the objective, that means like your why, the objective of this quest?
That one wasn't in my schooling.
That because your teacher was a galar?
The mole watched a broken cloud pass the moon slower than the tiny things in the sand moved. For the first time, Reno let something go, but the mole, also for the first time, felt compelled to speak. You might not believe me or take me serious. I have to do to several what I did to the shack keeper, but with them, there's no barter, no redemption, only desert.
Redemption? Well, fuck, you have one on me there, son. What's that?
Miss Favara said a special type of forgiveness.
Maybe not such a galar after all.
She was no galar, whatever that be. No, these men, these things, they must be stopped. He almost didn't continue, but then he did. My mission is against the Nefarious Ones.
Don't even say their bloody name, Jesus, son.
Now Reno glanced fast and anxious about the darkness, at the shadows between the firelight.
Next you'll be telling me you're going after the 5 masters. Tick them off like a shopping list.
Reno considered the silence as the mole strived to keep his expression unchanged. Eventually,
oh, fuck me gently with a lawnmower. You are a lunatic, or at least you think you are.
When no reply came, he continued.
Nobody believes me, but I saw one of them once, the 4th, the one with the backward eyes. Still felt like a bugger was looking right at you, though, all through you. God, I don't like to remember it. It gives me the willywogs. And good luck with that second one. Some say he's got no arms, some say he's got no legs, and some say he's got a cock the size of an anaconda. I heard one of them's a skeleton, but with a brain like. Used to be the word for it, but it's lost now. Like a fiddle with the small people, they reckon.
Truth?
Hell yes. Whole towns of it in the purple zone. Not that I'd ever go anywhere near that map. Me and my pal here want to stay in one piece.
I had some schooling in all the masters, but the first is the least known. As for the 5th, some say he's a giant, others a bee.
I got good and bad news for you. The good news is you're real close now, for what it's worth. So if you're looking forward to getting butchered, the wait is nearly over. Yeah, you're within 7 clicks of the first bugger's abode, no doubt. And more good news. There's also some bloody big comm centers in the region. More than one. Working too, so they are. Don't know what use they'll be to you. Don't know if that's quest-worthy. But you'll get some value there. Can trade for all sorts of Bolsheviks. Even maybe a magic box.
How can you know this? Did you viddy the landlines yourself?
Oh, I fiddled very well, son. They're out there, to be sure. More than one. So even if you find one picked to the bones, another might not be.
And the bad news?
Well, to get you there, you've got to pass through the worst ghost town I ever saw. That's what. The bloody bats roams like wolves. The mole didn't believe in ghosts, but he saw one once in his dreams. Regardless, it was time to sleep. He rolled over into the dirty and chewed up the last of the string meat, eliciting a humph from his new friend. Even from this low position, he could still catch the top of the power installation amongst the smoky clouds. Occasionally, the generator towers caught the moonlight, and when they did, they refused to give it back. It rattled around their metallic bones, a ballroom full of cavorting lumens. If you were on the edge of sleep, or visiting from an alien world, or just plain forgot, you could be forgiven for thinking that these generators were alive and well, that energy and matters flowed through them at improcessible and incomprehensible speed, that they powered an elaborate Venn diagram of overlapping networks, that men still stood and commanded and wept, that there was still hope for the unrealizable dream.